Hey guys. This is part 21 of What If Naruto was sealed and woke up after 2000 years. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start.
We are pain, that's all. We are God.
Chapter 52, An Unshared Opinion. Location, Tuchanka. The Urdnot scout commander had wasted no time in telling Morden's team that if his student had been taken by the Blood Pack, it was more than likely Clan Warlock had a hold of him now. The scout commander let them borrow a Tomka to reach Clan Warlock, but that was it. They took the Tomka across the surface of the planet and reached Clan Warlock land. After a quick walk, they found a hospital and came across a dead human. Naruto's clone was already having a bad feeling about the whole situation. That feeling just got more prominent as Morden scanned the body and revealed what had happened to her. She had been someone who was experimented on, and it had killed her. What was a little more unnerving than that was the fact Morden almost seemed impressed with the work done on her. That attitude followed them down deeper into the hospital, past the Krogan who was supposed the clan speaker. He had certainly sounded pompous enough for the job, and no one was sorry when both Musashi and Miranda shot the explosive tank underneath the platform he stood on, and to a room where they found even more data on the experimentations. That's when things became grim for the Solarian, as he realized just what was happening in the hospital. When he explained what he thought what he was doing while working the genophage, he denied being guilty but conceded that he was responsible. When they found the Urdnot scout and discovered that he had been pumped full of drugs and claimed that he was helping cure the genophage, that was when Morden became concerned about what was happening there. After Musashi encouraged the scout to get off his ass and get back to the Urdnot camp, they continued on and found the head of Clan Warlock along with his elite group of Blood Pack. The battle that followed had been bloody and only ended when everyone on the Blood Pack side was dead. The clan head was killed when Musashi attacked him with his Bakken, emerging victorious while the Krogan lay dead, beaten to a pulp, at his feet. When they went to the door that the Blood Pack had been protecting, they had been expecting to see prisoners or even more dead bodies on slabs that were experimented on. But instead, they found a Solarian working on a large computer, fingers and hands covered by Omni-tools and working tirelessly. He barely glanced back at the open door before turning back to look at his work. Morden spoke first, completely surprised. Melon. Alive. Unharmed. As they walked into the room, he took note of his former student. No sign of restraint. No evidence of torture. Don't understand. For such a smart man, Professor, you always had trouble seeing evidence that disagreed with your preconceptions, the Solarian at the computer said with a snarky tone, finally turning around to look at everyone there. How long will it take you to admit that I'm because I wish to be here? Fucking hell, Zaid swore as he realized what actually happened. He wasn't kidnapped by the Blood Pack to cure the genophage. You came willingly, Miranda finished, looking at the Solarian. He regarded her with a look bordering on irritation. How observant of you, he declared sarcastically. As Morden realized what his teammates were saying, he looked at Melon with disbelief and accusation in his eyes. Impossible. Whole team agreed. Project necessary. How was I supposed to disagree with the great Dr. Solus? Melon demanded. I was your student. I looked up to you. He wasn't going to let that blind him, not after what he had seen in the hospital. Experiments preformed here. Live subjects. Prisoners. Torture and executions. You're doing? He demanded. We've already got the blood of millions on our hands, Doctor. If it takes a bit more to put things right, I can deal with that. Those are bold words, Miranda remarked, eyeing him coolly and with a slight amount of disdain. He gave her the same look. You've seen what I've done. Do you think that I can't follow through with them? She knew that he could. He had already proven it. But why would you do something like this? Jacob asked him. Can you even believe that what you are doing is justified? He actually looked insulted that the question was even asked. We committed cultural genocide. Nothing I will do will be justified. The experiments are monstrous, because I was taught to be a monster. He glared accusingly at Morden as he said those words. You do anything like that, Doc? Zaid asked him. He shook his head even as he kept his eyes on his once student. No. Never taught you this, Melon. His once student scoffed. So your hands are clean? What does it matter if the ground is stained with the blood of millions? You taught me the ends justify the means. I will undo what we did, Professor. The only way I know how. I thought that the genophage only neutered the Krogan, not killed them, Musashi remarked loudly, knowing full well otherwise despite the fact. He just wanted to see what the Solarian had to say in defense. And he had an answer. Krogan fight over fertile females. They become mercenaries or pirates because they see no alternative. They would be thriving in a cultural renaissance now had we not decided that this is they what deserved. Inaccurate, Morden retorted. Krogan population resulted in war. Simulations were clear. Miranda wondered about those simulations. She wondered if they had just been tested in real life instead of just on a computer. That was the problem with Solarians. They would test and test in the lab but only test what they had in the field when they were forced to. But that was irrelevant at the moment. Here's what I don't understand, she said to Melon. If this was all to cure the genophage, why would you work with Clan Warlock? And how did you get access to the data on the genophage? The data was easy to obtain, he answered without hesitance. We all still had clearance. We were heroes. All I had to do was ask. As for the Warlock, they were the only clan with both the resources and the commitment. Why not go to Clan Erdnot? They've got a bigger clan. He scoffed. Erdnot Rex is too soft. He wasn't willing to do the experiment I needed. It's Erdnot's loss and Warlock's gain. Their clan will be the first to recover from the crime we committed. What do you think would happen if the genophage was cured? Jacob asked him. If they expand again and send the galaxy into chaos, you will be at fault. But he didn't look worried at that proclamation. We justified this atrocity by saying the Krogan would cause havoc and war if the population recovered. But look at the galaxy. Batarian attacks in the Traverse, Geth attacks on the Citadel. Is this a more peaceful universe? He pointed an accusing finger at him. The assault on your Eden Prime might never have happened if we had let the Krogan recover. We'll never know. Now that was just sheer ridiculousness. He knew, and one look at the others told him that they shared his disbelief. How? He asked the Solarian. How would a recovered Krogan race stop what happened at Eden Prime? An increased Krogan population would have forced the Council to take steps, likely involving colony rights in the Traverse. The Turian fleets would be vigilant for any military activity in the area. They might have stopped the Geth at Eden Prime. Supposition, Morden told his student, impossible to be certain. Don't you see? He pleaded with him. We tried to play God and we failed. We only made things worse, and I'm going to fix it. I think it's safe to say that this little mission wasn't what any of us were expecting, Zaid remarked. The way he saw it, it had become one giant clusterfuck. We can agree on that, Musashi said, nodding his head. Miranda looked over at Morden. What do you want to do now? She asked him. He looked at her, and then at his once student. He took a deep breath and declared, have to end this. As soon as he heard those words, Melon panicked. He looked around for a weapon and found a gun on a nearby table. He grabbed and pointed it at Morden. You can't face the truth, can you? He demanded, waving the gun wildly. Can't you admit that your brilliant mind led you to commit such an atrocity? He tried to focus on them all, and that was his mistake. Morden moved fast, got in close, and punched him hard across the face. He stumbled back through the computer screen, dropping the gun, only to be grabbed by the neck. Morden held his own gun to his former student's face. Unacceptable experiments. Unacceptable goals, he all but growled at Melon. Won't change. No choice. Have to kill you. His look of panic was replaced by fear. Doctor, I do not talk. Accept death with dignity, what little left. He stepped back and raised the gun into a proper firing position. But then a hand clamped down on his arm, stopping him from following through. Don't do this, Morden, Naruto's clone said to him, looking him in the eyes. You're a doctor. You try to save lives, not take them. At first, he didn't understand those words. But then he did, and it was like the lights came back on in his mind. He let out the breath he had been unconsciously holding. No. Not a murderer. He lowered the pistol. Thank you, Commander. Think nothing of it, the clone said, letting go of his arm. He backed off from Melon, stepping through the computer screen again. Professor? His former student began to ask, only to trail off when he saw the looks everyone was giving him. Morden put away his gun. Finished, Melon? Get out. No Warlock left. Project over. He started to do just that when Miranda spoke. I see a problem here. There's a chance he could tell the other Krogan clans what it was that he was trying to do here. He could tell the rest of the galaxy about the modified genophage. She didn't care if that happened, but she had to see it from what the outcomes would be like. Morden shook his head. Special task group good at covering tracks. No proof. He did consider the rest of what she said. Warlock willingness to work with Solarian unusual. Other Krogan will kill him. His former student looked nervous at that prospect. Good. He should have thought of that before he had started all of this. What if he tries starting up this whole thing again? Zaid asked, looking at the computer screen. I don't want to go through all this shit again. No. He looked over to the computer and opened his own Omni tool. Locking this unit. Special task group can cut access to old data. He turned to the computer screen and went to work. As he worked, he still talked. Could start from scratch. Decades of work, though. He looked back at Melon. Didn't teach you everything I knew. The computer vanished with barely a sound to it, and they all looked at Melon. The clone was the one who stepped close to him. He told you to get out, he said. Why are you still here? Melon stared at the human like he couldn't believe what he had said. He looked over at Morden. Where am I supposed to go, Professor? He asked. Don't care, Morden replied coldly. He could feel his gun at his side. He resisted the urge to pull it out again. Try Omega. Can always use a new clinic. Melon gave him one last pleading look. The Krogan didn't deserve what we did to them, Professor. The genophage needs to end. He didn't get a reply, and so he walked out of the room. It was only when he was gone that his former teacher said, Not like this. He looked over to Naruto's clone. Apologies, Commander. Misunderstood mission parameters. No kidnapping. My mistake. Thank you? You good, Morden? The clone asked. Unsure. Should have killed him. Wanted to. Easier than listening. Easier for him, too. Experiments indicate how far he's fallen. Expected it from Krogan. Not one of mine. Do you remember the conversation you had with Naruto where you first told him about what you had done? He asked. Do you remember how he reacted? Morden nodded. Of course, he answered. It wasn't likely that he would forget. What of it? The clone looked him straight in the eye and said, Wouldn't you say that the hypocrisy was what drove him to do all of this? That he saw it and tried to undo it in his own way? Possible. Understandable logic. But he looked around where they stood, at all that his former student had caused. Too brutal, much too brutal. Would not have worked. He was trying to do the right thing in the end. Ends do not justify means. Never should. You should remember that the next time you want to defend what you did with the genophage. His voice didn't crack like a whip, but there was an accusing tone to it. The Solarian doctor didn't argue or protest. He nodded his head in agreement. Yes. So many variables. Stress responses. Impossible to truly predict. Something to think about. Yeah, while you're doing that, can we get out of here already? Zaid demanded. He kept looking back where they came, expecting another Krogan to come charging at them with weapons blazing. Wait. One last thing to do. He grumbled at that. Well, fucking do it already. The Solarian looked at his Omni tool. All the information was on it. He looked at Naruto's clone. Melon's research. Only loose end. Could destroy it. Closure, security. Still valuable, though. Then hold on to it, the clone told him. His finger hovered over the delete command. One press and it would all vanish. It was tempting, he knew that. It was also the right thing to do in this situation. Worked for years to create modified genophage. Should destroy this. Melon's work could cure genophage. Don't know. Effects on Krogan. Effects on galaxy. Too many variables. Too many variables. Take a look at what they are now, Morden, Musashi said to him. This is their homeworld. This is where they are from. It's a ruined wreck. It's something they did to themselves, true. But they could have done something about it if they had hope. They don't have hope. They haven't had hope since the genophage was first deployed. Wasted potential, he acknowledged. They could have done so much more, be so much more than what they were now. If you delete that data, you'll be robbing them of hope again, Morden. Do you want to be known as the Solarian who damned the Krogan race to extinction because he was afraid of their past? He didn't want that. He had taken lives, he wouldn't deny that. But he did not want to damn an entire species to their deaths. It just wasn't in him. No, he finally declared. The clone caught on to what Musashi was trying to tell him. Give them that chance, Morden, he spoke. Save the data, use it in a safer way that doesn't demand bloodshed as a sacrifice. Point taken, Commander, he conceded, pulling his finger away from the Omni tool. Still years away from cure. But closer than starting from scratch. It's something. Something was always better than nothing. The Solarian looked at them all. Ready to go. Ready to be off to Chanka. Anywhere else. Maybe somewhere sunny. We can't go just yet. The clone turned his head so he could look at everyone. You'd better get back to the Urdnot base and meet up with the other team. Once we take care of Grunt, we can head out. What are you going to do, take a nap? Zaid asked. He clasped his hands together. I'll take the quicker route. He disappeared with a plume of smoke, echoing in the room with a poof. The merc blinked, clearing away the smoke. Damn, forget he was a clone. The shaman looked mildly impressed at Grunt as the younger Krogan came up to him with his Krant behind him. You have passed the rite of passage, earning the honor of clan and name, he proclaimed. Grunt got to his knees and bowed his head to the elder. Many survive, but it has been years since a thresher maw fell. And never has it done that 9 of them were quelled with a single roar. Your name shall live in glory. He looked down at the Krogan kneeling before him. Grunt, you are Urdnot, he declared, and all the Krogan in the room listened to his words. You may now own property, join the army, and apply to serve under a battle master. Naruto Uzumaki is my battle master and my sensei, Grunt replied so that everyone could hear him. He has no match and has taught me much. I hope to learn more from him. Understood, the shaman said. He gestured at the younger Krogan and said, Stand up, Urdnot Grunt, and face your new clan. He did as he was bidden. All Krogan eyes were on him as he stood and turned. He would have matched them all without fear, but that would have meant he had to turn his head and that wouldn't have worked. So he stared at them all. Finally, one of the Krogan marched up to him, pushing his way through Grunt's Krant. He stood before the blue-eyed Krogan and bashed his head against his. Grunt took a step back from the attack, but that was all he gave. He stepped forward and returned the headbutt, hitting harder than him. The other Krogan fell to the ground with a loud thump. He got back up, but he didn't attack. Instead, he grinned wildly and held his arm. Welcome to the clan. Grunt took his offered hand and shook it. The Krogan pulled him forward so the other Krogan could see him better, shouting, This is Urdnot Grunt, he who tames thresher maws. The rest of the Krogan in the room roared in approval. Grunt's name quickly started being chanted. Urdnot Grunt. Urdnot Grunt. Urdnot Grunt. It almost seemed like they were working themselves into a frenzy with all their shouting and chanting. Then the shaman said quietly, Screw it, before raising his voice to shout party. The rest of the Krogan roared in approval and things went from there. The fact that there was a rite party happening quickly spread through the compound. That was what Morden's group came back to. They had initially thought that the place was being under attack, of course, a Krogan being thrown out of a window and then charging back and might have had something to do with it. Once the confusion had been cleared up, some of them wanted to get off to Chanka. Others were of the mind that with all the crap that they'd been through in recent times, they deserve a little R&R. The would-be argument ended before it began when Ruko went up to the protesters and said, There's free booze and loud music, and then marched back into the party. No one said a word about the fact that Miranda was the first person to follow her. And so, they enjoyed themselves. Throughout the party, there was no doubt in anyone's mind that Grunt was the center of attention. It seemed like the Krogan couldn't go a step or two without meeting a new clan mate that wanted to congratulate him, usually with a headbutt, which he returned. In the midst of all this, Naruto found Rex standing outside the main party, watching it all happen. You just can't help making trouble, the Krogan told him with a grin. No one has killed a Maw since my turn in the rite. Next you'll tell me he's Quint and Crap's dark matter. He chuckled. Guess that's what it takes to replace me. If you say so, Naruto replied. But we need to talk. That's what we're doing. Alone. He looked at the human again, and saw how determined he looked. All right, he said, walking away from the party. The blonde followed him to an abandoned room that looked more or less cleaned out. As the door locked behind them, Rex looked at him. You wanted to talk, so talk. If the Krogan wanted to get right to it, then so could he. When the last time I was Tachanka? He demanded. He didn't bat an eye when he replied, never. This is your first time, as far as I know. Rex, don't lie to me. Watch it, Uzumaki, he said, his throat giving off a low warning growl. I don't take too kindly to being called a liar. I wouldn't call you a liar out there. Now, when was the first time I came to Tachanka? Why do you think you came to Tachanka in the first place? He pulled out the scroll he had given Grunt. I took a look at this. It's a set of instructions for a jutsu that would only work for a Krogan. You gave it to Grunt, and you didn't look too surprised when he showed off that he had churka. That meant you knew about it beforehand. But how would you know about that unless you were forewarned? You wouldn't just accept anybody's word that this could or would happen. No, you would only take the word of someone you knew and trusted. Even then you would need a big example of proof to believe it. He looked at the human for a long second. Then he held out his hand and said, Can I have that scroll back now? This? Naruto said, looking down at the scroll incredulously. That's what you decide to focus on. It belongs to the Krogan. I gave it to Grunt, not you. Hand it over. Fine, he replied, tossing the scroll at him. He caught it smoothly and put it away without even looking at it. Now, are you going to answer my question or not? Now yet, the Krogan decided, folding his arms across his chest. Naruto almost started growling at that moment. He wanted to leap across the breadth of the room and pummeling the Krogan until he told him the truth. His feet were begging for the chance to take off and his hands wanted to start hitting away. But instead of letting them do what they wanted, he growled out, Rex, I'm warning you. To do what? He asked, cutting him off. All I'm hearing is a lot of suggesting. I haven't heard a piece of this so-called evidence. You know, Uzumaki, I'm starting to think that you're delusional or something. That was it. That was the one thing he didn't want to hear, and he just did. I'm delusional? He pointed an angry finger out at the door behind the Krogan. There is a fucking Shinju out there on Tachanka and you're calling me delusional. For a second, he had hoped that would be enough to convince Rex to tell him the truth of everything. But instead he asked, What's a Shinju? Don't mock me, Rex. I know you read the history books. You know damn well what a Shinju is and what means. That old tree your shaman talked about when he led Grunt and us to the keystone. That's the Shinju. He could still see the tree, standing so tall that it was a wonder it didn't pierce the atmosphere. The fruit hadn't blossomed yet, thank Kami for that, but the possibility for that to happen was still there. And you know about it. For the longest time, his old teammate didn't say anything. They stood there in silence, waiting. Naruto knew that it was Rex's move. He had to agree or deny the truth. If he denied it, then it would be ass-whooping time. He handled Rex once before, he could do it again. But instead of confirming the truth, Rex pulled an OSD from a pocket and tossed it to him. Here, watch that. He grabbed the OSD and quickly uploaded it to his Omni tool. The video screen came up and he was looking at himself again. The video him had the same mixed look of stun and shock that he had when he first saw the Shinju. Hey, he said. I take it that since you're watching this, you're on Tachanka and just found out about the Shinju. I'm still taking it in and I went there with Rex. He looked off to the side. Say hi, Rex. I'll leave it to you, Uzumaki, Rex's voice said. There was a sound of feet walking away and a door closing. The video self looked back at the screen. So there's a Shinju on Tachanka. Despite that, I'm not that surprised. He held his hand up. You might already know this if you watched the one I recorded before I went to Tachanka, but that one was just a theory. This is confirmation. There were ruins underneath the tree, probably where it grew out of. Rex was surprised to see it, so it's probably no long stretch to think that no Krogan has ever gotten that close to the Shinju. The ruins had some information that I needed to know. Like I said before, humans weren't the only ones to have wielded chakra. Hell, we weren't even the first ones. From what I discovered, this wasn't the first time we've ascended to the stars. The last time around, it was the Krogan that taught us how to wield chakra. Wait, they what? He couldn't help but ask. Stop talking, I'm listening. Kurama snapped at him. Be glad that Liara told you about the Reaper's cycle of destruction, because it seems that what I found fits it to AT. Both the Krogan and humanity were active during the last cycle, but we weren't alone wielding chakra. There were others. I don't know who they were, but I know there were more. And if you're wondering why we didn't beat back the Reapers the last time, the ruins explain that too. It seemed that when the Reapers had arrived, we were engaged in some kind of war against the Protheans. I don't know the reason, but I can bet it had something to do with chakra. Maybe it was just biotics versus chakra. Whatever the reason, the Reapers showed up and laid waste to everyone. As far as I can figure what the ruins are telling me, humanity and Krogan were able to escape by essentially hitting the reset button. The reset button? He asked. What does that even mean? I don't know what that means fully, his video self said, like he was reading his thought. But that's the closest thing I can compare it to. It must have worked since we're still around and the Protheans vanished. Now I don't know what happened after the reset button was hit, and I don't know why only humans have chakra this time around. But I'm not going to share this information with the galaxy until I know absolutely everything. Rex knows this and will keep his mouth shut. It's a good thing this Shinju is dormant because the last thing the Krogan needs is unsupervised access to chakra. Also, be very careful when in the presence of a Shinju. I damn near made this one blossom when I got close and used Kurama's chakra to see if it was still alive. And yes, I used the plural. I've got a feeling that if there had been a Shinju on Earth and one on Tachanka, there are going to be more of them out there. I'd be willing to bet money that they're going to be on the homeworld of every race in the galaxy now. Whether it's going to be for the Reapers or when the war between Churka and Biotics flare up, I don't know. What I do know is that I need to find them now while making sure the tribe and the Akatsuki don't find me until I want them to. He looked directly at the screen. With any luck, by the time you get this one, you'll have already started on making the operatives that are going to be sent with you doubt the Akatsuki. If you can do that, it'll get a lot easier to move around and do what needs to be done. However, if they saddled you with a man called Kailing, kill him immediately if you haven't already. So get to it, Naruto. Everyone, even if they don't know it yet, is counting on you. He smiled warily. No pressure or anything, right? It's not like you've been in this position before. The screen went dark, but Naruto didn't close it. He just stared at it for a long second. Naruto? Rex said to him. You still with me? The question brought him out of it. Yeah, I'm here, he replied, closing the Omni tool. He stood there, getting his breath back into a sense of order since he was fairly certain that he was on the verge of hyperventilating. I can see why you wanted to keep this a secret. The Krogan shrugged. Had to make sure you weren't faking it, he said. Naruto understood that, truly he did. What he had just learned, or learned again, was a bombshell of epic proportions. It would shatter every known perspective there was about chakra, and he didn't even have the full scope of it yet. What other races had chakra in the last cycle? Did the Turians, the Solarians, or the Asari get hit by the reset button too? As he asked these questions to himself, the memory of Okur's last words came to him. The words he said about the Krogan wielding chakra and the fact that the video him said unsupervised access of Krogan to chakra would be a bad thing made a connection in his mind. He looked at Rex again and asked, Was that the only time I came to Tachanka? Yeah, the Krogan answered. Then how did you know about Grunt? Because you contacted me on a secure channel to meet you on a planet 2 systems away, he told the human. I show up and you meet me there to tell me about what Okur's doing and how you helped him. The words clicked in his head and he could see the dots. Cammy helped me, he groaned as it all fell into place. You remember what it was that you were doing? No, but I can hazard a guess. Now that he started to think about it, what he was doing with Okur must have changed after that last meeting with Okur one of the other OSDs had told him about. Perhaps this was why. I plan on making that Shinju out there blossom and let the Krogan eat the chakra fruit. But I can't do that without making sure that things go unsupervised. But I can't be here to train them all at the same time, and I can guess that Krogan will willingly learn from a human. So you make them willingly? He gave Rex a look. That many Krogan? He asked rhetorically. I'm liable to end up dead. No, what I would need is a Krogan who has already got chakra and the knowledge to use it effectively. He would also need to be a warrior respected amongst the clans and able to keep them in line. The ideal Krogan with chakra, he finished. Grunt, Rex said. Grunt, he agreed with a nod of his head. His student had been planned for that moment, when he got into contact with the Shinju. Then he groaned. Cammy, what the hell was I doing during that time? The Krogan shrugged again. You could always ask Tali. Tali? He repeated. He nodded. She was with you on that ship. From what I could tell, the two of you had been working together. That was news to him, yet it made sense too. It was Tali that started him down this path. If he could get into contact with her, She might be able to give him information that will fill him in better. But he was going to have to be careful about it. That's good advice, Rex, he told the chief. Thanks. You're welcome. Now, can we get back to this party my clan has thrown for your student? There wasn't really anything else they could do then. Once he was back on the Normandy, then he could ask Edi to see if she could find Tali, if she could do that. But for now, there was a party. Sure. Let's get to it. Glad to hear it. They both turned and walked for the door. Hey, make sure that your Krogan don't harm my team too much. I need them in working order. You don't trust my clan? Rex, I remember that time you got drunk and wanted to train. Joker still hasn't forgiven for what you did to the training area, and I know Gurs holds you responsible for that sore arm and ringing headache. He had no argument for it, so he didn't bother. I make no promises. Location, the Normandy. As it turned out, Krogan were quite the party animals. The team wasn't able to get out of it until 8 hours later. Even then, they needed a night to get back up to snuff. Most of them ended up sleeping in odd places, with Musashi, Zaid, and Gurs crashing in the bar, Eric falling asleep at the mess table, and Miranda and Ruko ended up snoozing together in the showers. Nobody knew where Kasumi had gotten to. They just hoped she wasn't up to mischief. The only people who were still going strong were Naruto, Morden, and Grunt. The doctor had stayed on the outside of the party, barely drinking anything. Naruto had been in the midst of the party but had the Biju to keep him steady and still going. But it was a testament to the Krogan party attitude and drinks that 4 of them were out cold. It took a lot to take out one. Grunt was still feeling the party feeling and was pacing around in his room. That was where Naruto found him. "How you doing, Grunt?" he asked the Krogan. "Not so loud, please," Shikaka begged inside his head. The Krogan was still pacing. "Not Grunt," he said, obviously testing the name on his tongue. "I like it. I have a clan. That makes me want to fight, not just able to. And Yuvink. I wanted to disembowel him. To tear out his spine like a trophy." He crowed, but there was a growl to it as well. "So I take it that you're irritated that the Thresher Maw got him?" "In a way," he replied before grinning widely. "But I got satisfaction by taming the Maws. I wanted them to kneel at my feet. You seem angrier and more bloodthirsty than before we landed on Tuchenka." He waved it off. "Rex said I was normal. Just had this built-up stuff because of being grown in the tank," he explained. "Now that I know it's not an outside thing, and I have a place as a Krogan, I like it." "I'm sure he does," Karama remarked. Isabu winced. "Could you please not talk? My head is swimming right now and not in the good kind." "I share your pain, Isabu," Chome said. "But please shut up. It's all I can do to stay afloat." "You're flying, not swimming." "I'm swimming. What did I just say about talking?" Naruto chose to ignore the drunken Biju in his head, which took a bit since there was more than one, and kept his focus on Grunt. "So you're good?" He nodded and grinned feral. "Our enemies are in trouble, Commander. And we'd better not run out of targets. And this is the Krogan, I want to make sure they don't go overboard with the Churka," the blonde thought to himself. "Ah, he'll mellow out," Sun declared. Gyuki groaned. "His mind is spinning, please stop talking." "Don't worry, Grunt," Naruto said to his student. "I've got a feeling we're going to have plenty of enemies to deal with." Grunt grinned viciously and pounded his fists together. "Everyone gets a turn." "Ha! Wouldn't have it any other way," he declared. "Oh boy," thought the blonde to himself. Sun was still insistent. "He'll mellow out." "Stop talking, please," Gyuki begged. Naruto left the Krogan and wandered back up the decks. When he saw that Morden was in the lab, typing away at computer and looking at a chart, he also saw how focused the Solarian was. It was clear that he was trying to forget what had happened on Tuchenka. Considering the memories he had gotten about that hospital, he couldn't blame the Solarian. He stepped inside the lab. "Hey, Morden," he said in greeting. The doctor barely looked up from his work. "Commander," he replied. He walked over to the table, stopping in front of the Solarian. "How are you feeling?" "Feeling fine. Trying to work. Must concentrate." "Morden, that's not what I meant, and you know it. How are you feeling about Tuchenka?" He stopped what he was doing and looked up at him. If he had been a human, he probably would have taken a moment before answering. "Still hard to believe that Mayon betrayed me. Betrayed my work. There was a strange look on his face as he spoke, a mixture of anger and pride. Disgusted by his actions. Proud of his nerve, though. Always thought he lacked backbone. Hope he finds something new. Better goal, better purpose. Fewer torture tests. That's all we can hope for, Naruto replied. Gaki, not the time for sarcasm, Kurama rebuked him. This is a serious conversation. Try to keep it like that. There's always time for sarcasm, he retorted. It's just a matter of applying it. The fox shook his head again. I swear, you spent too much time with Ibiki. You told me that already. It bears repeating. Bears? Asked Shikaku, looking around rapidly. I don't see any bears here. Are you sure there are bears? The Jinchuriki chose to ignore the drunken Tanuki. So, you're fine with what happened? He asked Morden. Of course, he replied, like it was nothing to make a big deal out of. Can't change what happened. Life continues. Back to mission, back to work. Become like Maelon otherwise. He gave Morden a look that he knew was weird. Okay, he said, unconsciously drawing the word out. He stared at the human straight in the eye. He had seen the look, but he wasn't put off by it. He got it enough times to explain it. Solarian emotional processing faster than other species. Has to be. Short-lived culture. Can't spend time reminiscing. I think it's safe to say that you've walked onto dangerous ground, Naruto, Matatabi cautioned. Perhaps it would be best if you backed off from this line of conversation. Why should he? Chome demanded. He's not a coward, are you, Naruto? Huh. Huh. No, you are not. Go forth and conquer. Loot and pillage. Stand victorious over your enemies' broken bodies with their women at your feet. What? That was the only thing that Naruto could to say. What the Nanabai had just said made absolutely no sense outside of a book or something. He had read some of those books and the main character always seemed to be incredibly muscular, almost to the point where he wondered if they had been taking steroids. Just ignore him and continue the conversation, Saiken suggested to the blonde. He took that idea and went with it. What about the research Maelon did? What about it? Morden asked, unconcerned. Have it over there somewhere. Not dealing with it now. Need to focus on collectors and inhibitors. He paused for a moment, and then looked up at him. Not important now, regardless. Appreciate you and your clone helping me on Tuchanka. His head went back down. Should get back to work. Wasted enough time already. Right, sorry. He stood there for a second before asking another question. Do you have a new method for the inhibitors? Not yet, currently focused on collectors. Alright, but can you switch for a moment? His fingers paused and looked up. Go ahead. I was able to focus on Tuchanka, channel natural chakra into myself. I think I broke more of the inhibitors, but I don't know how many. The Solarian was around the table in an instant. His Omni tool was open and he waved it up and down the human's body. Scan does show new number of inhibitors. Slightly smaller amount. No big loss. How much is a small amount? No more than 15, maybe even 10. He sighed in irritation. Damn, I was hoping for a little bit more. It seems like every time that we come across something new, it kills less and less of the inhibitors. It was really getting annoying to being denied his full arsenal. That fight on Tuchanka had him flat on the ground when it shouldn't have even broken a sweat on him. Understandable assessment. But not must let disappointment get in way. New development might be blessing in disguise. What do you mean? He closed the scanning application on the Omni tool and switched to a notepad 1. First, need information. Natural chakra? Unheard of. Perhaps new strain of chakra or recent. No. No. Would not be new or recent. Opposite more likely. Old rather than new. How old? At least 2,000 years if you are aware. Perhaps even older if not discovered by you. Passed down by teacher. Yes. Yes. Would make sense. Word of mouth. Much easier to protect than written word. Morden? Said Naruto, looking at him as he started writing down notes, and talking in that breakneck speed he got whenever he got onto something. The Solarian looked up from his notes. Yes? I haven't told you anything about it yet. He blinked his eyes and the human between the two of them wondered for a moment if he understood what he was trying to say. Then he stopped and breathed. Got ahead of myself again. Really must stop doing that. Bad habit. His hand didn't stray from the keypad. Not wrong, though. Guys, Naruto asked the Biju. What are you all doing on the ceiling? Chome asked, buzzing around in circles. Shikaka looked at the Kabutomushi, tilting his head and then shaking it rapidly. Why are there two of you? Stop singing! Cried Isabu as he banged his head against the ground. I can't stand the singing. I love you, man, Gyuki sobbed into Kurama's shoulder. I don't tell you that often, but I love you. The fox was trying to get the Ushioni off his shoulder without making it look like he was trying to get the Ushioni off his shoulder. Yeah, that's great, Gyuki. No, I mean it. I really do love you. Good to hear. Now if you could just... He tried shifting the shoulder, but the Hachibi stayed on him like he was glue. Even though we've had our arguments, we've always been friends, right? Yeah, I guess you could say, and we'll always be friends, right? Well, considering where we're stuck for the moment, that just made him sob even harder. Now what? The fox demanded. I'm so happy to hear that, Gyuki declared with a fresh wail of sobbing. Oh, for the love of the old man, he growled in frustration. He looked over at Matatabi, Sun, Koko, and Saiken for help. They chose to stay away. Naruto waited until he felt like it was an opportune moment to step back in. For the sober ones still among us, I love you. You said that already. Now get off. What do you think I should do? There's nothing else you can do, Naruto, Matatabi told him. You're the one who opened the door for him. Sun nodded in agreement. You open it, you tell him what it is. You never know. He might actually be able to give you something that will help, Saiken offered encouragingly. Koko was about to say something when Chome flew overhead. Chome, veer off! Veer off! The Gobi shouted in warning. Wah! Was all the Nanabai said before slamming into a wall. Alright, Naruto said in agreement, ignoring the craziness that was currently his head and focusing on Morden. You ready? He asked. Of course, the Solarian replied, looking very eager. His fingers hovered over the keypad, begging to type down. He took a breath. What I'm about to tell you is to stay between us until I feel otherwise, got it? Morden nodded. Natural chakra is chakra that isn't formed by a person's mental and physical energies mixing together, obviously. It is an energy that comes from the atmosphere and land. Belief of planet life force. There's no belief part about it. Anyway, to take the energy of nature and mix into one's chakra is a difficult thing to do, and there are varying degrees of success. But when it is successfully mixed, the results are a boost to the user's strength, agility, and chakra pool. They would also get a more powerful jutsu arsenal. Natural energy seems to be enhancement. Perhaps having it enters new factor in equation. Could change whole problem. Might be able to revisit previously used methods. Naruto heard those words and had a mixture of gladness and slight fear. The gladness came from the fact that it might be possible to reuse the methods that they knew worked. If that was the case, they might be able to get more out of it. The fear came from the memory of Ruko punching him. If you think it would work, I'd be willing to try it, he finally said. But let's stay away from Ruko for now. The Solarian looked at him oddly. Why stay away from Ruko? The memory hit him again. He winced at it. Despite the fact that they do get along now, his sister still has one hell of a punch. And it hurt. Don't ask, he finally said. Commander, Yeoman Chambers' voice spoke through the intercom, getting both of their attentions. He looked up at the ceiling. What's up, Yeoman? Sir, you just received a message from Akatsuki Information Processing. It is in regards about your friend on Ilium and the Shadow Broker. He turned for the door. On my way up, he replied. Sorry, Morden. The Solarian waved it off, already going back to his work. Location Ilium. When her office door opened, Liara looked up to see Naruto walk in. The rest of his team stayed outside, and when the door closed, they were alone. It's good to see you again, Naruto, she said to him. You too, Liara, he replied with a smile. You mind if I sit? Please, go ahead. So, I heard Gers helped you out with your little rat, he remarked as he sat down in the chair and leaned against the cushioning. You know that he did, since you sent that clone to check on me, she replied in a rebuking manner. It wasn't a harsh rebuke, more of a gentle one. There was also the fact that she was smiling too. I know. Trust me, it was a bit of a surprise when I came into this office and I found your secretary dead on the floor. The clone had dismissed itself once it knew that she was safe and capable of protecting herself. She was very talented, she acknowledged. I imagine that had she been ordered to assassinate me, I'd never see her coming. But her barriers needed practice. Practice that she won't be getting, she added almost as an afterthought. I approve, Gyuki declared of her attitude. The Hachibi was now completely sober and refused to talk about what he had done while drunk, making the others swear the same, to which Kurama was all too glad to do. So what do you plan to do now that she's dead? Naruto asked her. I gather information, peel away layers of lies, and shine light into the shadows. Her voice grew harder as she spoke about what she was going to do. And when I find the shadow broker, I hit him with a biotic field so strong that what's left of his body will fit into a coffee cup. Gyuki nodded. And I say again, I approve. She is definitely growing up, Sun agreed. It was a nice feeling to watch that happen. Naruto, on the other hand, had a different opinion. It reminded him a little too much of Sasuke. Watch yourself, Liara, he said to her. I don't want to see you turn into the monster here. Don't worry, Naruto. I'm not my mother. Everything I'm doing of my own free will, for better or for worse. What if I could help you there? She looked at him with slight puzzlement mixed with suspicion. What do you mean by that? He held up a hand to her. First off, I need something from you, if you've got it. Her eyebrows furrowed together, and her eyes showed their frustration. Naruto, she started to say. It's a simple thing, Liara, he assured her. I just want to know if you can find Thane Krios. He had spent the previous night looking over the dossier of the assassin. If he was on Ilium, Liara should be able to find him. The assassin? She asked for confirmation. He nodded his head. He arrived a few days ago. My sources tell me that he may be targeting a corporate executive, Nazsana Dantius. She paused for a moment and looked him straight in the eye. It is the same Nazsana Dantius that you met on the Citadel. He reflexively growled at her name. I gathered that. He remembered the time the two of them had met. Needless to say, the end of it all didn't leave a good impression on him. So how is that arrogant little twat of a bitch doing? I would assume rather well, since she is now a corporate executive. You assume? She was an information dealer. Information dealers never assumed. It was bad for business. She does have a reputation, unofficially, for killing anyone who gets in her way or threatens her reputation. She eyed him pointedly and added, although I have also heard reports of how she now despises you. He waved that off. She wouldn't be the first. Hell, she wouldn't even be the 100th. He got serious again. And how about her sister? He asked. Which one? She asked back. He paused, letting that little piece of information process through his brain. Just how many sisters does this woman have? He asked himself. More importantly, Saiken said, how many sisters have pissed her off and she had to kill them? That question took him back to when he last talked to Nazsana. It left a bad taste in his mouth then, and it left one now. Still, the satisfaction of seeing lose her cool was worth it. The one we went after, he told Liara. She's still around, but I don't think that they are in contact anymore. One good thing came out of that then, Sun declared. More like one less pain in the ass, Matatabi refuted. Getting back to Thane, Naruto said to her. What did he do when he got here? He contacted a woman named Sarina. Sarina has an office in the cargo transfer levels. Perhaps she can tell you where Krios is. He smiled at her. And that was all without looking at your computer. She smiled back. I'm a very good information broker, Naruto. The world of intrigue isn't that different from a dig site. Except that the dead bodies still smell, she added. Yeah, that they do, he agreed. I didn't know you were a part of the world, Commander. He turned somber. The battlefield has the same smell. She lost the smile. She remembered what few battles she had been ever since she had joined his team. But what few she had been in paled completely to what he had been through. After all, she had never been in an actual war before. But she remained focused on what was happening before her and not had happened. Now that you have your information, perhaps you can give me what you offered. Sure. He opened his Omni-tool and sent her the package that had come in his email. There you go. She opened her own Omni-tool to look at the package. As she read the information, her eyes grew wider and wider. She finally tore them away to look at him. Is this genuine? As far I know. I didn't do the legwork, so I'm going to take it with a grain of salt. But this It looks like a leaked transmission between Shadow Broker operatives. Some hints as to the location and... Her breath hitched in surprise and shock. Furin is still alive, oh good goddess. Who's a Furin? He asked her. He's a friend. He is a friend, she answered, repeating the words like she was trying to remind herself of who he was to her. From the way she was talking, it was clear that she had thought he had been dead for some time. What happened to him? She had trouble actually saying the words, but she managed to say them. The Akatsuki had gotten word that the Shadow Broker was going to sell you to the tribe. They contacted me and advised me to try and rescue you while the transfer was happening. I actually met Furin that way. I'm guessing the rescue didn't work? She gave him a long look. What do you think? Naruto, sarcasm. Snapped Kurama. I know, he replied. Sorry, wrong time. It was. We tried to rescue you and we failed. Furin sacrificed his life so I could get away. An amused look crossed her face. It's funny. He betrayed me more than once. He was double-dealing for the Akatsuki, for the Shadow Broker. But in the end, he gave his life so you could out, the blonde finished for her. She nodded. I owe him, she said simply. You do realize that there's a chance he's dead, right? He asked. It probably wasn't the right thing to say at that moment, but it still needed to be said. I know. But yesterday, all I wanted the chance to avenge his death. Today he's alive. I'll do whatever I have to do to get him back. All right, he decided. What do we do next then? Suddenly, she looked uncertain. Her eyes looked everywhere that wasn't his face. I don't know. I need time to prepare, to think. She walked back around the desk and turned off the computer. She stood there, looking at nothing. I'm going home, she finally said. He watched her with concern. Liara, you good? He asked. I've spent 2 years plotting revenge. Now I have the chance to make it a rescue. He could see what she was going through. It was the same thing that Shikamaru used to do during the war, taking a moment to breathe, relax, and think. None of them had begrudged him that time to relax. The one that time someone had and tried rushing him. They didn't talk about it, ever. How about I come by in about an hour? He offered. It'll give you some time to think of something. Okay, she agreed. Hopefully, I'll have a plan by then. Thank you, Naruto. She opened her Omni-tool and gave him the address. Once he had it, he turned for the door. Thank me when we get through this in one piece. For now, I've got an assassin to hunt down. He paused as they let the words hang in the air. Not in the literal sense, of course. Of course, she agreed without batting an eyelash. After leaving her office, Naruto divided the team again. One half was to wait out the hour before heading over to Liara's house, the other was to track down where the assassin had gone to. Virtually everyone wanted to be on bar waiting duty, and so it devolved into a big round of rock, paper, scissors. Once it was sorted out, the two teams went their separate ways. Naruto had made a clone to lead the team he wasn't, but in all the confusion, the team had lost track of which one was the real Naruto, and which was the clone. But as Zaid had put it, does it fucking matter in the end? The team went to find Sarina consisted of Eric, Gurus, Zaid, Ruko, Grunt, and Naruto, with his helmet back down. They found her where Liara had said she would be. She didn't hesitate to spill the fact that she had given Thane information to find Nazuna, in the still being built Dantius Towers. She even offered to take them to it. They accepted the offer and took multiple air cabs to reach the towers. The towers are heavily guarded, and you'll find more resistance closer to the penthouse, Sarina told Naruto in the lead cab. Grunt sniggered in the back. Grunt, Naruto said in warning. I didn't say anything, he replied. That snigger was enough. The Asari driving the cab looked at the two of them. Something I should know about? She asked. Are you going to be a part of this mission? Ruko asked her from the back of the cab next to Grunt. No. Then fuck off. Naruto turned his gaze on her. Ruko. She sighed in resignation. Fine, she said in surrender. Please fuck off. It wasn't much, but he would take it. Better. You guys certainly are polite, Sarina remarked sarcastically. I prefer Tynit. She scoffed at that. The scarred human wanted to shoot the Turian, the Einherjar threatened to brain the human, and the Krogan laughed at the stupidity of it all. And? Asked Grunt. I'm not talking to you, she said to him before looking at the human beside her. I was talking to him. He shrugged his shoulders. It's normal for us. Like I said, ain't it? Right, she said, clearly not believing him. She chose to switch the topic of conversation. So, this assassin, you planning to stop him? She asked him. From killing Nasuna? He asked back. Hell, I'd load the gun for him. Cammy knows that twat should kick the bucket and fast. She couldn't disagree with that sentiment. But there was still the original question. Then what are you going to do? Recruit him. She gave him a look that questioned his sanity. He didn't say anything back to her. All right then, she finally said. Just fly, would ya? Ruko all but ordered her. She ignored the blonde woman but did keep flying. A few minutes later the location came into sight. There they are, the Dantius Towers. Naruto looked at the building they were flying towards. Like she had told before, only one of the towers was actually finished and the second was still under construction. From a distance they didn't look that much different from any other building he saw on this planet. They were probably meant to be more imposing close-up. Shouldn't be too hard to get in and up, he remarked. Say that after you get in, Sarina retorted. Anyway, you'll have to get up the second tower and cross the bridge to the penthouse. That's where she'll most likely be. Her mercs will fight you every step, but it's your best chance. Thanks. This is going to be fun, Ruko declared with a grin that could be seen as bloodthirsty to some. To the team, it just meant that she was excited. Get us down there already, Grunt ordered Sarina. Fine, hold on, she replied, dropping the cab out of the flying lanes and driving down to the platform. Once it was settled, the cab opened up and they got out. Don't linger too long, she warned them. They'll be here to greet you soon enough. The second cab landed behind them. It opened up and the rest of the team got out, leaving behind a traumatized-looking Turian. What did you do to him? Ruko asked Iris, looking at the cab driving. I didn't do anything, he replied defensively. Zaid, on the other hand. Can we fucking focus? The merc asked, looking at him with a scowl. Whatever happened, he didn't want to talk about it. Sarina rolled her eyes. Good luck. You're going to need it. She closed the cab and flew away. The second cab quickly followed after her, almost breaking the barrier of the platform to do so. Can we get a move on now? Grunt asked. Eric shifted his mortar across his back. I agree. Same here, Ruko said with a nod. Naruto started forward. All right, time to play the game. Something moved in the corner of his eye, and when he looked, he saw Solarians running away in fear on the other side of a window. What are they doing? Wrong question, Isaba told him. Right, what are they running from? The answer quickly came into view as Loki and Fenris mechs following them. The Loki mech started shooting at the Solarians, killing them without any effort. His mind flashed back to the war at the site. People screaming. Men laughing in joy. Attempts to escape through a city street. Moans of men and women forcing themselves onto others. Pleads from the people being forced for them to stop. People being killed with no conscious thought. No chance to stop. The others must be left behind. Cammy, help him. We got contact, he shouted, snapping himself back into the present. Eric, blow the window out. Right. The Einherjar replied, setting the mortar down. One shell was all it took to shatter the glass. Naruto, his sister, and his student leapt through the open window once the glass had fallen. She flared her biotics and crushed the dog mechs, throwing them to the wall. Grunt roared and rammed one of the Loki mechs, running it down and crushing it beneath his feet. Naruto provided covering fire, keeping the other Loki mech busy. The bullets pounded into its frame and it was pummeled into the ground before he even reached it. Damn, these Doton bullets are good, he thought as he came to a stop. Probably something to consider for future fights, Matatabi pointed out. They would probably work well with futon bullets. He could see it and agreed with it. He quickly scanned the floor and saw there were no other mechs around. He heard a pained groan coming off from the side, and when he looked that way, he also saw a blood trail. He followed to a side passage and found a Solarian leaning against the wall, hands over a bullet hole. Help, he pleaded in a strained voice. The blonde knelt down beside him. Easy does it, he said in an assuring voice, just like he had heard from Tsunade and Sakura. I can't feel my legs, my chest is killing me. They both heard the sound of boots hitting ground. He looked past the human and his eyes widened in fear. Naruto could guess what he's seeing. It's okay, they're with me. They're not going to hurt you. Heard that before, he replied. Look, just tell me what happened here. Why were they shooting you? I don't know. We're just night shift workers, he protested. It must have made the pain hurt more because he hissed in pain and slumped down even more. Nasana sent them after us. He couldn't find the breath. Naruto put his hand on his shoulder. Don't push yourself, he said comfortingly. Take your time. He stopped and breathed, getting it back. She sent the mercs to round us up, but we didn't hear. He paused to breathe again. They just started shooting. Out of nowhere? The blonde asked, slightly outraged. It would make sense, Sun mused. It would catch them off guard and lowers the chance of them getting away. Naruto could see how that would work, but that didn't mean he liked it. He had seen that tactic one too many times during the war. It was the enemy's favorite tactic whenever a city or a town was hit. The Solarian didn't know about the conversation going in the human's head. He nodded and kept talking as best he could. Yes, we were too slow. It was horrible. Everyone screaming. Blood leaked out of his wound, making him groan again. The mercs said there was no time. Nazana wanted us out of the way, immediately. Then the dogs. He slumped forward to spit out blood. Gurus looked worriedly at the others. He's not going to make it if we don't help him. Do we have the time for that? Zaid asked him. He glared back. You want to leave him to die? Hey, if we waste time, the target gets away. You want that instead? The Solarian groaned a death rattle. I can't breathe, please, help me, he begged, his voice getting weaker with each word spoken. That tore it for Naruto. Gurus, Medigel, now, he commanded, holding out his hand. The Turian dispensed a pack from his Omni tool onto his hand. The pack was solid in his hand and glistened in the stale light above. Without hesitating, Naruto pressed the pack against the wound. The added pressure was enough to break the skin of the pack and let the Medigel flow through the wound, healing it as best it could. Soon after, the Solarian's breathing got better, and he was able to bring himself out of the slump. Thanks, he said. It's no problem. That should tide you over until the medics get here. Eric, call it in. Of course, the bigger blonde replied, opening up his Omni tool. Really? This guy? Demanded Grunt. Why? Naruto looked back at his student. Does he deserve to die? No one deserves to die, he retorted. They just die all the same. That had been one of the lessons he had been taught. Naruto was glad to see that his lessons had been taking hold. But that wasn't the point now. That might be, but he doesn't need to die now. The Solarian started to stand up, slowly. I think I'm better. He put his hand on the wall for support, but looked at them all the same. Find the other workers. Help them. He stood up with him. We'll do what we can. But can you help us? We have to get up to the penthouse. Take the service elevator up to the upper levels. The bridge between the towers isn't finished, but if you're careful. He took another breath and stood up a little higher. Watch out for the mercs. They're everywhere. Good enough for me, Grunt said with a meal. Grunt, Naruto said warningly. He looked at the Solarian. Just how many mercs are here? A lot, he answered. Dozens of them were wandering around here all day. You'll find more the further up you go. Sheesh, this Nasana is beginning to sound like one paranoid bitch, Zaid remarked. He tried to stay away the paranoid ones, but it seemed like they found him. Was it just his luck, or was he becoming paranoid? The merc did raise a good point. It was a bad and stupid move to shoot people who were just doing manual labor. In fact, Naruto considered it to be a very stupid move, but there has to be a reason for it. Why is Nasana doing this to you guys? He asked the Solarian. To her, we're expendable. But I didn't realize she was that ruthless. My friends, co-workers, slaughtered, he said to himself in a miserable tone. They were jumping off ledges to escape the dogs. I don't think you're going to get anything else out of him, Matatabi told her Jinchuriki. Yeah, you're probably right, he agreed. He looked over at Gurus and gestured at the door next to the Solarian. Gurus nodded and went to the door, opening it up with his free hand. We'll take it from here, the human told the Solarian. You go hide until help gets here. If we find any other survivors, we'll send them down. The Solarian nodded gratefully. Thanks again. He limped away from them. All right, we've got mercs and robots waiting ahead to protect a paranoid bitch of an Asari, Gurus declared. I think at this point all we can hope for is that the mercs she hired are amateurs. Ruko scoffed at that. Somehow, I don't think we're going to be that lucky. And you just jinxed us, way to go, Zaid added. He looked around for any kind of wood to knock on but saw nothing. Let's just get a move on, Grunt said, holding his gun at the ready. The door they went through led into a side corridor. Are we sure that this will lead to the service elevators? Eric asked from the back, keeping his mortar handy. Naruto looked briefly at the map Sarina had given him. If I'm reading this thing right, it will. We're just going to have to go up a couple of levels before reaching it. And it ain't going to be a walk in the park either, Zaid added. That's a given. He shut the map down and walked forward. The entrance to the next room was right in front of them. It was a storage area that had 2 entrances in the back. But crates and steel boxes weren't the only things in the room. There were also mercs and mechs there too. Each group saw the other at the same time and opened fire at the same time. Naruto's team had the lead in when Eric fired off a shell. It was a short burst shot that landed right in front of the other group. While they were stunned and pushed back, they moved in and finished the fight. Ah shit, Zaid cursed as he looked at the merc he had killed moments before. What? Ruko asked, looking over at him. These aren't amateur mercs. They're Eclipse. She looked down at the merc he had killed. Sure enough, there was the yellow armor and sun sigil that marked an Eclipse merc. Ah shit. Not these guys. Incoming, Grunt shouted out in warning from the front. Heads swerved to the entrances at the end of the room. Eclipse mercs were coming out each side, firing as soon as their targets were in sight. Naruto tossed his guns up in the air. Ruko, push them on the right, he ordered as he flashed through hand seals. Futon de Tapa. He blasted the mercs on the left back with his jutsu while Ruko got them on the right. As they got themselves back, he gave the next order as he grabbed his guns. Move up! Pick your side! The team split up and went down both entrances, fighting through each group. They came back together on the other side and saw that they were a much bigger storage area that curved out of sight at the far end. Anyone see an exit? Gurus asked. Not at the moment, Ruko answered. But cut through the idiots in our way, we'll find it. It is too crowded structurally for the mortar, Eric told them, taking note of the area. There were more boxes and crates, but that wasn't all. The ceiling was rather low, and there were columns in there too. I'm switching to close quarter. He shifted the mortar on his back and pulled his axe free in the same motion, doing it smoothly too. Alright, get up here, Naruto ordered him. Ruko, take his place in the back. They made the swap while she took a shot at one of the mercs, catching him in the shoulder. Eric finished the job by stepping up and splitting his head like a melon. The formation cut through the mercs in the room like farmers scything wheat. It took time, but they got through. The difference between them and a farmer was that they didn't gather up the fallen. They went through the door at the end, coming into a room that ascended up to the next level via ramp. They took the ramp to the next door, which led into a room with an entrance to the left. Hey, a voice said ahead, just outside of their view and causing them to stop. I think he went in here. Well, go get him, another voice replied. You go. Get your ass in there, a woman's voice ordered one of them. Nasana's not paying you to stand around. As the voices quieted down, the team moved out past the opening into the open central area. The 3 mercs that had been talking were on the other side behind a makeshift barricade consisted of stacked lumber and crates. There was an entrance that went around the barricade on the other side of it, but Naruto chose to take the more direct route. Grabbing his guns by the barrels, he took a running charge at the barricade and leapt over it. The mercs saw him too late. As they turned to meet him with their guns up, he had already taken out the first with a knee to the face. The second fell when he swung the gun hilts at the merc's knee. There was a slight sickening crunching sound and the man screamed as he fell down. The scream was silenced when he got a bullet to the forehead. And while he finished one with the left gun, the right put a futon bullet through the third merc's throat. He stood back up on his feet as the others joined him. And I thought I was the show-off, Ruko remarked. You got it from somewhere, he replied. Gurus watched the path in front of them with his rifle. We have company, he announced, seeing mercs and mechs coming towards them. Focus, please. Right, she said, throwing a biotic pull at one of the mercs. He came flying towards her, and she buried a bullet in his head. The other mercs sent the mechs first, trying to soften up the opposition. Naruto faced one of the Loki mechs coming at him with a shotgun aimed at his head. He ducked down low to avoid the blast. As it barked over his head, he fired 2 bullets into the leg joints. The mech fell to the ground, and it only took a hard stomp from his boot to end it. The fight continued on and his team gained ground, moving to the other side of the area. Due to the confined space, Grunt took the lead with Eric right behind him. While the Krogan would smash through any opposition that was dumb enough to get in front of him, the Einherjar would finish up with a few quick movements of his. Didn't take the Eclipse mercs to realize that trying to attack the Krogan head-on was a bad idea and promptly redeployed. However, they still had to deal with the others and that did not do well for them. Ruko and Gurus banded together where she would pull a merc or a mech out into the central area where it was just open air and he would shoot them. If his bullets didn't kill them, the fall definitely would. Zaid stuck close to Naruto, providing him cover while he got close and personal. The shinobi was glad that he had figured out to use guns in close combat because the mercs were not expecting it. He left broken and bashed bodies everywhere he moved. When they were finally done, they were on the other side and looking at an elevator. This must be the service elevator that Salarian was talking about, Gurus remarked. So let's get in it already, Zaid said. Naruto started to walk towards the button, his hand reaching out to touch it. Wait, Eric said suddenly. They all froze and looked at him. What is it? The shinobi asked the Einherjar. Do you hear that? He listened. At first, he just heard the silence of the building. But as the silence turned to background noise, he could hear faint breathing coming down the right side. When he looked that way, he saw a door glaring red, showing that it was locked. Gurus, he said. I see it, the Turian replied. He hoisted the rifle back onto his weapon rack and activating his Omni tool. A few minutes later, the red turned green, and the door opened. They stood at the ready, guns up and pointed. The door opened and they found Salarian workers behind him. They saw the guns and instantly became frightened. Please, don't kill us. One of the workers begged, fear choking his voice. We'll go, we'll go. It was obvious that he was trying to finish the sentence but the words just would not leave his mouth. A second Salarian peeked out from behind his hands. Hey look, they're not Eclipse, he said in realization. He looked at the team with worried concern. You're here to help us, right? Well, we're not here to kill you, Zaid remarked. The Salarians looked nervous. If they could back up even more, they could. Don't listen to him, Naruto told them. You're safe. Thank you, said another of the Salarians. We are in your debt. Do you think that they could help us? Eric asked, shifting his axe to rest on his shoulder. The shinobi considered it for a moment. They might. He looked at the Salarians. I don't suppose you guys have seen someone walking around here? They gave him blank, almost deadpan looks. Details, Naruto, details, Koko reminded him almost in chastisement. Right, he replied. He wouldn't be one of the Eclipse. He'd be on his own. The Salarians looked at one another, trying to think of an answer that wouldn't get them killed or interrogated. Finally, the one in the yellow suit offered, well, whoever sealed us in here. He trailed off, thinking that it sounded weak. Yes? The one in the purple suit said, when he found us, I thought we were dead. But he just closed the door and locked us in. Locked you in? Repeated Gurus. That didn't sound like something one of the mercs or do any of the assassins he was aware of would do. Sounds like our assassin was trying to keep them safe, he remarked to the team. The Salarians heard what he had said. Assassin? The yellow suit repeated nervously. But the purple suit was calm. Here for Nazana, I bet. She's got it coming. You treat people like this, it always come back to bite you in the ass. Sounds like you boys have an opinion, Zaid stated. What gave it away? Grunt asked sarcastically. Naruto paid them no mind. He was more interested in what the Salarians had to say. I'm guessing that you guys have an opinion about Nazana? Yellow Suit scratched the side of his head almost nervously. She's a hard woman to work for. Purple Suit scoffed. That's an understatement. She works us long hours. No overtime. And this is what you get in payment. She's unpleasant, to say the least. Don't I know it, Naruto thought to himself. Once she had revealed her true face, the Asari was one hell of a bitch. It was an attitude that other Asari also have, hers was just blatant. Okay, so haven't you quit yet? We would if we could. He almost seemed disappointed in the fact that he couldn't. The human didn't understand. He thought that it was a simple thing to do. Why haven't you? Our contract, Purple Suit said, making it sound like it was the most obvious thing out there. We're stuck until the job's done. Quitting for any reason can be hazardous to your health. Yellow Suit nodded in agreement. We hear that anyone who leaves early tends to disappear. Probably just a rumor, he added in quickly. You working on Ilium for this kind of bitch, and you think it's just a rumor? Zaid asked, looking at them like they were a bunch of idiots. Purple Suit matched his look. Who wants to find out for sure? Naruto understood what they were trying to say. If they even tried looking for the truth, it was likely that they would end up dead themselves. That wasn't something that they would want. He could see that they were getting nervous just by talking about the subject, so he changed it. Okay, how about that assassin? Did you see where exactly he went? He's no Solarian, I can tell you that, Purple Suit told him. But I've no idea where he went. Sorry. If he's after Nazusana, he'll be heading to the upper levels, Yellow Suit offered. That's good to know. Are there any workers left in the tower? If they are, they're not alive now, Purple Suit declared. We were lucky. Yellow Suit had a thought and voiced it. Well, some got out before the dogs were sent in. Maybe a few are hiding somewhere. We've met one of them already, Naruto told them both. He was down below. He's wounded, but he'll last until help gets here. You should go find him. Stay down on the lower levels. They looked at him hopefully. It's safe down there? There aren't any more mercs or mechs? Ruko snorted. If there are, we didn't do a good job. And we always do a good job. Yellow Suit took that as a yes. We'll get down there now. Let's go, everybody, he said to the other two Solarians in the room. Purple Suit followed him out but stopped by Naruto. Thank you, he said, meaning every word of it. And tell your assassin to aim for her head cause she doesn't have a heart. Get moving! Yellow Suit called out to him. He followed the other Solarians after that. I like that suggestion, Zaid stated as he watched them go. Who knew the little worker bees had that attitude in them? Ruko could have answered that with a biting sarcasm. But instead she chose to remain on the mission. Let's get back to the mission, huh? Yes, Grunt agreed. The elevator is waiting. As they went back to the elevator, Gurus pointed something out to them all. We're a little exposed out here, especially if anyone's in that elevator. Eric saw the same thing he did and came to the same conclusion. Perhaps we should take cover and conceal ourselves? You guys can do that, Naruto said. But I'm going to take care of it before it can start. Feel free to join in at any time. He walked up to the elevator and pushed the call button. Everyone else looked at his backside, wondering if he had lost his marbles. That didn't last too since they had to hide. While they did that, hiding behind crates and stacked metal and lumber, Naruto waited in front of the elevator. Mezzanine, the elevator's six spoke as the elevator sounded like it was getting closer. Have a pleasant stay. The door opened and the shinobi was looking at two Eclipse mercs and a Krogan whose shoddy-looking armor marked him as a bounty hunter. Hi there! He greeted them warmly, and then proceeded to sock the merc on the left in the face. The man clutched his nose and fell to the ground, falling unconscious. The Krogan charged right out of the elevator aiming right for him. He took a step back and leapfrogged over him, calling out, "All yours!" to his teammates. As he came back down, his legs shot out and got the other Eclipse merc right in the face too. She collapsed too as he landed in a prone position. He winced as his body met floor, his bones rattling with the impact force. That's going to hurt later on. Only if you get old, Kurama retorted. Grunt and Eric finished off the Krogan, leaving him in semi-bloody pieces all over the ground. With the fight done, everyone joined Naruto while he dragged the unconscious mercs out of the elevator. You left us with the tough one, Grunt told his sensei in an almost accusing manner. Naruto eyed him. And your problem is what? I was tank bred. I wasn't bred to be a tank. I would hope not. Besides, I didn't say that you had to get him. You did that on your own. He dropped the merc and got into the elevator. Everyone else joined him, although it was a bit of a tight fit. They managed to work it out. Grunt and Eric were in the back with Zaid up against the wall. Gurus and Ruko were in front of them, and that left Naruto right at the door as it closed. The elevator automatically went up without anyone touching anything. Naruto guessed that since it was a service elevator, it would automatically go up to the floor where the work was needed. It came to a stop quickly enough. He wondered if it was because it had been so fast or the level that needed work was at a lower level than he expected. He really hoped that it was the former. Turns out that his luck held, since when the door opened and there was a window in front of him, he could figure out that they were at the right elevation. Of course, there was also the eclipse staring out the window as he talked to his calm. I haven't heard from teams 4 or 5. Don't worry, my team is always good to go. I don't know where he is, not yet. Don't worry about it. We don't need any reinforcements. I'll take care of it. It's under control. I'll go down there myself. Now would probably be the best time for you to stop him, Naruto, Chomei suggested. The blonde was already moving forward, pulling out a kunai. The others followed but at a slight distance so they could give him room to work with. He reached the merc and swung his arm around, placing the kunai at his neck. With his other hand, he stopped the merc for going to his gun. Make a sound I don't want to hear, you won't like the outcome, he whispered into the man's ear. To his credit, the merc didn't react like he was trying to escape. All he did was flinch at the kunai at his throat, look at the people at his back, and say, "Damn it. The assassin, where is he? Why are you looking for him? You're not one of Nisana's mercs. Who are you? Do you really think that matters at this moment?" He considered the moment he was in. "Look, pal, even if I knew where he was, I wouldn't tell you," he finally said, trying to go for bravado. The kunai pushed harder against his skin but not hard enough to break the skin. "Not what I wanted to come out of your mouth." He kept his bravado going. "I've got nothing more to say to you. If you shoot me, my team's right through there." He jerked his head off to the left where he knew there was an entrance beside the elevator. "They'll be all over you." For a moment, his captor didn't say anything and he thought that he had gotten the point across. But then he felt his legs being forced to move and so was he. He was walked right up to the mirror pane. "Look down," Naruto told him, "all the way to the ground." He did that. It was a long way to the ground floor of the towers and even longer to the actual ground. His throat went a little dry at the sight of it all, actually. "Do you really want to lose your life because of Nasana has you employed?" Again, he thought about it. It didn't take him too long. "No, I suppose not. Nasana was a tremendous bitch either way. So tell me what I want to hear." They didn't move from the window, and he didn't allow the merc's head to look up. "Okay, look, last I heard, the assassin was down on the mezzanine. But the teams on the bridge think they might have spotted him. Nobody knows for sure." Again, he waited in silence. When there wasn't anything said, he broke his own silence. "Look, are you going to kill me now or let me go now?" "Neither," Naruto said, hitting him upside the head with the kunai's ring. He slumped to the ground, completely unconscious. "He owes you one," Geras remarked. "Anyone else would have killed him." "He should have killed him," Zaid said. "Who knows when he's going to wake up?" "With any luck, we will be done before he is," Eric told him. When Naruto turned, they all turned with him. There were 2 doors, one on either side of the elevator. Again, they split up and a group took a door. They led into the same room, which was big and looked like it was still being constructed. There were mercs on the other side, but not a lot of them. There was a bit more mechs than mercs. But they all had their backs to Naruto and his team. They were more focused on talking to someone on the calm. "He's all over the place," one of the mercs said. "What do you mean?" a familiar voice asked through the tower's calm. "Ah, there's the bitch's voice," Naruto thought to himself. Instead of announcing himself loudly this time around, he chose to go forward silently. He holstered his guns and pulled out a kunai. The others looked at him curiously. He signaled them to follow his lead. He walked forward, making sure that his feet made no actual sound. The merc he reached he grabbed by the head and sliced through his neck, also cutting his vocal cords to prevent screaming. As the merc went through his death spasms, he was laid gently down on the ground. The others saw what he was doing and tried their best to do the same. Geras took the time to hang back and upload a virus to the mechs that would shut them down permanently. There were some that said that couldn't be done, but since his team back on Omega picked up this virus, he could honestly say that those people were wrong. The best part of it was that it shut down the mechs quietly, leaving no one aware of it happening if they didn't look. "Glad I put this on my Omni tool before leaving the ship," he thought to himself. Once it was sent, the mech slumped forward and went dead, but the mercs didn't know that. They were too busy listening to the conversation with the employer. Naruto used that focus to eliminate them, sneaking up behind them and ending their lives before they had a chance to fight back. He wasn't paying attention to the conversation because frankly he didn't need to listen to Nazuna until he wanted to. By the time they had worked their way through to the other end of the room, there was only the lead merc left. He was still talking when Naruto got behind him and slit his throat. This time, he didn't bother to guide the body fall down gently. It fell with a meaty thump. What was that? Nasana's voice demanded from the comm console. No one answered. Answer me, damn it! Naruto reached for the reply key and pressed it down. Hello again, Nasana, he said. Who is this? What? You don't remember me? I'm hurt. Tell me who you are, now. He shook his head, even though she couldn't see him. No, I don't think I will. I'll just let you stew for a bit. Tell me. She screamed, her voice raising about 2 pitches. He looked down at the small keyboard and saw that there was a key for the camera. Oh, what the hell? He said to himself. I might as well have some fun. What are you doing? Ruko asked him as he reached for the camera key. He didn't look back at her when he took his hand off the audio key and said, Could you guys get out of sight? Why would we do that? So I could make this more fun. They all gave him a funny look, but he just waved them away. They backed out of sight and he faced the comm console, hitting both the audio and video keys. Nasana came into sight with a look that just screamed how angry she was. Who the fuck do you think you are? She screamed at him. You are employed by me. You don't get to decide when to hang. She stopped and looked at him more closely. Wait, you're not one of the mercs I hired. Very good, Nasana, he said to her. Would you like to go for one more and guess who I am? She got annoyed. Just tell me. He smirked beneath his mask. No, I don't think I will. But I will ask you one question. Do you remember that first rule about shinobi? The look on her face went from annoyed to confused before finally stopping at frightened. You, she said. You're alive? But how? She didn't even answer her own question and instead went straight to denial. No, no, no. The console went dead. Well, nothing more I can do, Naruto thought to himself as he turned away from it. There was a ramp that led upwards to the next level. He signaled the others to follow him. As they went up, they could feel a breeze over their armor. Wherever it was they were going, it was in the open air. There was an eclipsed merc on the level, around the central area again, and a Sari surrounded by mechs. She took one look at the group coming towards her and swore. Shit! She programmed the mechs to attack before rising her own gun up. Ruko stopped her from firing by grabbing hold of her through her biotics and throwing her off the ledge. She moved to the edge and looked down to make sure that she didn't try anything funny, like saving herself. Everyone else dealt with the mercs, and that didn't last very long. When the last one fell to the ground, they continued along the path. It took them to an entrance to an open-air path. This must be the bridge, Gers noted as he took a look outside. There was construction everywhere, and it had moved to form several makeshift barriers. It seems that we are close to ending this, Eric said. Zaid was glad for that. He was getting tired of all the Eclipse mercs here. They brought back memories of the old days. It made him growl on reflex. Let's get this over with, he said, still growling. Naruto looked back at him with a curious look. He ignored it. This isn't one we're going to run through, Gers told him, pulling his head back. I saw a lot of mercs out there, and it was only one part of the bridge. There's probably more out there. Do I look like I give a fuck about the odds? No, but that would probably explain why you have quite the collection of scars, he replied. There's only one thing we can do in this situation, Naruto said before either of them could into a fight with each other. We move forward across the bridge, and we don't stop for nothing. If you're going to shoot someone, make it to kill and fast. Grunt nodded in agreement. Now that's a plan I can get behind. Same here, Ruko said. That bridge was going to be completely open and that meant a lot of people were going to be flying. He looked at the rest of the team, and they all shared the sentiment. Since there was nothing else to say, he went with action. He stepped out onto the bridge and started shooting. They followed him out and started shooting the mercs waiting for them. Like he said, they did not stop. They kept moving. And when he was close enough, Naruto grabbed his guns by the barrels and descended upon the Eclipse mercs. As Nasana watched the fight on the bridge, her state of panic began to grow. It had started not when she had learned there was an assassin out to get her, that was just part of business. She had deployed the mercs in her employment to the towers to find and kill the assassin, even giving them the go-ahead to eliminate the workers if they thought it was prudent. She wasn't worried about the workers. She could always find more of them. Her panic had begun only very recently, when she had been talking to one of the commanders. When things went suddenly silent, she wasn't surprised, just irritated. But then that new voice started talking and her irritation grew even more. She demanded his identity, and instead he asked her a question. It was a question she had only learned from one person who had screwed her over when she tried to use him. It was enough to start the panic, especially when she saw the snarling fox on his helmet almost glaring at her. She had hoped that the mercs on the bridge would be enough to stop him. But watching them get all but torn apart by that shinobi and his team just made it worse. If they didn't mow down any mercs, they were thrown off the bridge. Goddess protect me, she prayed as she watched them reach the end of the bridge. One of them, a Turian, saw the camera, lift their gun and fired once. The camera went dead. She looked at the few mercs in her office. Be ready, she told them. They started checking their weapons, but she still wasn't assured that would be enough. 10 minutes later, which felt like an eternity to her, the doors opened and that snarling fox strolled in. How? How is this possible? She demanded instantly. You were dead. I was missing, he corrected her, not dead. Anger burned inside of her at the rebuke. If there was one thing she hated more than being conned or double-crossed, it was being lectured about something stupid. She had endured enough of that during her childhood from both her mother and her elder sisters. She didn't need it from a human who could be considered a baby next to her. And now you're here to kill me. I might, he said, causing the guns to snap up, if I could give a care about killing you. Don't patronize me, Uzumaki, she snapped, turning away from her desk to look out the window. I'm sure you find this all very ironic. First you handled my sister, and now you're here for me. She looked out the window a few seconds more and then looked back at him. Well, you've made it this far. Now what? She asked him. He looked over at the Krogan beside him. Did I say that I was here to kill her? I didn't hear you say that, the Krogan replied. He looked at the scarred human. Did you? Nope, he replied in a growl. That's what I thought. He turned his attention back to Nazuna. I think that your brain might be going a little bit. Do you have another reason for destroying my tower? She demanded as she started to pace around. Decimating my security? We didn't destroy your tower, and we only killed the people who got in our way. We're not here for you, he told her. She whipped her head back around to look at him. You expect me to believe that? She didn't even bother to wait for an answer. Is it credits? Is that what you want? Just tell me your price. We can make this go away. Wow, said the blonde human female. She really is fucking stupid, isn't she? There was a faint rattling sound in the air ducts, something that wouldn't be noticeable if a person wasn't listening for something like it. She does seem to have that problem, Naruto agreed, talking like they were only speaking about the weather or something equally trivial. He looked back at Nazuna. You don't seem to get it, Nazuna. You're in the deep shit now, and you have no one to blame but yourself. No! She refused to believe that. She had gotten out of worse situations than this, and she would do it again. Who gave you the right to play God? She demanded. I may not be perfect, but look at you. We both kill people for money. What's the difference? If she could have seen his eyes at that moment, she would have seen that they were flat and hard. The difference between us is that I don't care about the money and I don't kill people because they were dumb enough to get in my way. They have a choice with me, fight and don't. She seized on his words. You've got a choice. You don't have to do this. I can tell you. She stopped when she noticed that the mercs in the room were all acting very agitatedly. What? She demanded. I heard something, one of the mercs told her. She bared her teeth in frustration. Could the day get any worse? Damn it. Check the other entrances, she ordered. She whirled around to look at Naruto and his group. You, stay put. When I'm finished dealing with this nuisance, you and I are going. Her computer started ringing. Now what? She silently demanded as she looked back at her desk. There was a message waiting for, a video message. The caller was unknown and she didn't have the time to deal with this kind of crap. She opened the message only to delete it automatically. But as soon as the video opened and she saw who was on it, her finger froze. Hey there, Nazuna! Her sister, Dahlia, said in a cheerful voice as she lounged in a chair, her feet resting on a table. It took her a second to realize that was their mother's office, and she didn't allow anyone in there, not until she was dead. Of course, that brought the question. Is she dead? If she was, did she die of natural causes or did Dahlia kill her? If it was the latter, she couldn't blame her for it. If there was one thing that she and her sisters could all agree on, it was that their mother was a grade A whore and a galaxy-class bitch. I bet you're wondering what I'm doing in our dear sweet mother's office right now, Dahlia continued talking. Well, Mom passed away about a week ago, and as it turns out, I was the heir to everything she had, over the rest of our sisters. Imagine that. If I had died, you might have gotten everything instead. She swung her legs down onto the floor and placed her elbows on the desk. So since I figured that I now control everything that was Mom's, I would give my sisters something that they all deserve. That was when his smile turned vicious. And I've decided to pay you back for that little stunt you tried pulling 2 years ago. You're going to die, Nasana. Don't try to buy your way out of this one. You can't. As she smiled, the smile somehow managed to turn both cheery and vicious at the same time. This will teach you not to meddle in your sister's business, whether it's embarrassing to you or not. Bye now, little sister. I'd say that I would miss you, but you always were such a bitch. The screen went blank and she felt a hand on her shoulder, spinning her around. She came face to face with Adrel and felt a gun to her stomach. There was a sudden roaring sound and pain hit her like a sledgehammer on fire. But there was more to it. Her sight was dimming. What was happening to her? Was she dying? No, she protested as Adrel laid her gently down. Already she was losing strength. I can't be dying. I can't. Naruto watched the entire thing happen, from when the Drell dropped down out of the air ducts, eliminated the few mercs still there, and got to his target before she had even noticed that he was there. He had eliminated without hesitation, but then he began to lay her down against the desk, folding her hands over her chest to make it look like she was resting. He respects the dead, the human thought. That earned points in his book. As the Drell stood over the dead woman, he folded his hands into a form of praying gesture. Gers took that moment to speak. Impressive. You certainly know how to make an entrance. The assassin didn't say anything in return. He was still too focused on praying. Ruko huffed in irritation. You can hear us, right? She asked. I can, he replied, his voice echoing almost like he was in water. And I do apologize, but prayers for the wicked must not be forsaken. She looked down at the body, and then at him again. Somehow, I get the feeling that she doesn't deserve your prayers. Not for her. For me, he replied. When he was finished with his prayers, he walked around the desk, moving with the grace one could only receive from extensive and long training. He came to a stop in front of Naruto. Well, you wanted to talk to me. I am here. It was straight and to the point. Naruto liked him even more for it. There are a race out there called the Collectors that have been going after human colonies. We plan to go after them and stop this entire thing. He looked thoughtful. The Collectors, I have heard of them. Attacking them would require passage through the Omega-4 relay. No ship has ever returned from doing so. I believe that we will be able to find a way. Besides, they said the same thing about Ilos. A fate point, the assassin conceded. You've built a career on performing the impossible. Fucking understatement, Grunt declared with a snort. Amen to that, Ruko agreed. He didn't pay any attention either of them, instead choosing to look out the window at Ilium. He was quiet, pensive perhaps. This was to be my last job, he finally said, gesturing slightly at the body in front of him. What do you mean by that? Eric asked. I'm dying. He fell silent again as he continued to stare out the window. They didn't know what to say to that piece of news. He must have thought that they pitted him in some fashion. So he said, low survival rates don't concern me. The abduction of your colonists does. So you're in? Naruto asked him. He looked at the human right in the eye. For you, Naruto, I will work for no charge. I have a debt to fulfill to you. A debt? He repeated inside his head. What does he mean by that? As far as he knew, he had never met the assassin before. But if he was saying stuff like that could mean one thing. We've run into each other in the past 2 years, haven't we? The Drell nodded. Yes. What exactly did I do that earned a debt from you? You helped me stop my son from going down the same dark road I went down. That was going to be something they would have to talk about a later date. In any case, welcome to the team, Thane. He held out his hand. The Drell took it, and they shook hands. He looked back at the rest of the team. Make sure you guys get back to the ship in one piece, alright? They wondered what he meant by until he disappeared in a plume of smoke. We got the clone again? Zaid demanded, waving away the smoke coming at him. Once it had cleared, he got his answer. There was no sign of Naruto. Codex entry, technology carrier ships. The idea of a carrier ship is human in origin and comes from all three original countries of the Human Alliance. An attack on the elemental nations 163 years after the War of Three Flags, Sky War, was the only military action that helped evolve the concept. The elemental nations were victorious, repelling the invaders and defeating them. When they had victory, they took the spoils from their foes. And while they found the wingsuit technology that enabled the enemy shinobi to fly through the air a little interesting, they were far more interested in the catapult system that launched the shinobi into the air. The reason they dismissed the wingsuits was because they were obsolete. Airplane technology was already progressing in Midgard, progressing from propeller-based engines to jet engines. The Empire of Steel had a superior naval force, and the military command could see that air power would soon become a necessary part of war. Since the three nations were in alliance with one another, they knew that any future battles would happen beyond the combined borders and therefore would require naval strength to reach. Both the scientists of the frontier and Midgard worked on the problem, but it wasn't until the catapult was offered by the elemental scientists that they started to make actual headway. The end result was the carrier ship, which in its initial form consisted of being able to deploy fighter planes while sea. From there, the planes would be able to engage in dogfights or commence raids into enemy territory either via bombs or the deployment of paratroopers, which first consisted of either frontier or shinobi forces. The first carrier ship was deployed during the Sea Emperor's Second War of Expansion and holds credit for being the instrument that turned the tide of the war, First Battle of Water Tiger Bay. They remained at the forefront of human warfare and were the major factor of victory for the system's alliance during the Battle of Shanxi. As soon as the battle was over, peace had been made, and humanity was welcomed to the galaxy. The other races of the Council began to build their own carriers. Although most servicemen and women refer to the ships as carriers, they are formally known as the Chidori-class battleship. The name draws inspiration from the jutsu of the same, Chidori. As the story goes, the first carrier was captained by Izuna Uchiha, and when they had entered its first battle, the general quarters alarm did not initially work. Not wanting to get caught off guard, the captain ordered all channels on the ship to be opened and used the Chidori jutsu to alert everyone. While that story has never been actually proven, to this day the alarm of general quarters on Alliance carriers have been the sound of the Chidori screeching. Chapter 53, Shining Light on Shadows. Location: Naruto. The shinobi opened his eyes and breathed out, steadying himself against the seat as everything around him rattled. "Is everything all right, Commander?" Miranda asked him from the seat opposite him. "Yeah," he told her. "I just got information from my clone." "What happened?" she asked, shifting slightly in her seat. It wouldn't have been noticeable to a passerby, if there had been any on this ship, but he could tell that she was a little worried about what could have happened. He kept his smirk to himself. Ever since he had thrown the two of them into his cabin and locked them in for the night, Miranda and Ruko were much more relaxed around one another. They tried to keep it hidden, but everyone who looked could see it. They just didn't say anything. They were willing to let them think it was still a secret. "We got Thane on board," he told her. "Everyone got out of there alive, with the exception of Nasana." She relaxed her body back into its first position. "That's not surprising," she replied. "The way that woman has gone about her business, she was liable to end up dead sooner or later." "Yeah, but to have the hit ordered by your own sister." He had the memory of that video, and yet he still had a hard time believing it. Miranda didn't share the same opinion. "Believe it or not, Commander, having one of her sisters ordering the hit is just how most Badassari families deal with themselves. It's only a matter of figuring out which sister had ordered the hit." "The one I spared," he told her, "Dahlia." She said, thinking the information over. "That might be troublesome. It could come back to haunt you." He shrugged his shoulders. "So long as she can keep her nose clean and stay out of the business I found her in, it'll be no trouble to me. She's plenty afraid of me." "You say that confidently?" "Being shot in the leg before getting pinned to the wall with kunai embedded in each of your limbs and having two guns pointing at her stomach will make an impression on anyone." She paused and considered that. If she had not met Naruto Uzumaki, had only read the history books, she would not have believed that he would have been able to do what he said and thought that he was bluffing. The books painted him as the shinobi that led from the front during the Fourth Shinobi World War and brought them to victory. But as her father had been fond of saying to her when they covered history, the books paint only a part of the picture. Since she had met the man from the books, she could say, albeit very reluctantly, that her father had a point. Naruto Uzumaki was a man who had been changed by war, that much was obvious. He tried to keep things as peaceful as he could if he had the chance. But if the chance was lost, he would willingly go to the weapons and start fighting. He also didn't hesitate to kill his opponents. In fact, she would even go so far as to say that he took some pleasure in stalking and hunting them in a darkened environment. He was a person that could and would kill, sometimes in ways she didn't expect. The most recent had been when they had gone to Liara's apartment to meet up with her. When they reached the address, they had come across a crime scene. The apartment was the scene of an attack, and it almost looked like it was successful. She said that because there was no body of Liara. They would have been blocked from looking around if it hadn't been for another specter in the room, Tila Vaser, who recognized Naruto and let them in. From that recognition alone, Miranda figured that Nihilus had told the council that her commander was alive. That was the first tip-off that something was off. The second had been when the Asari specter had no problems with letting them take a look around. Their investigation had led to a backup log that had recorded a call between Liara and a Solarian named Seekit, who apparently had the location of the Shadow Broker to a cluster, and perhaps even a system. It soon became clear that the Shadow Broker had sent people after Liara. It was even clearer when they got to Draken Trade Center, where Seekit had his business, and witnessed 3 levels of the building get blown out. While the Asari went to the top of the building to go down, they went through the bottom and went up. It hadn't taken them long to run into agents of the Shadow Broker trying to find the same thing they were, Liara. They fought their way up to Seekit's office and heard a shot outside the door. They went through and found Tila amongst dead agents and Seekit. While she remarked that she could have stopped them if she had been a few seconds earlier, Miranda could tell that there was something faked about her words. That was proven when Liara stepped through the rubble, still alive, and pointed her own gun at Tila. That was when they learned that it was Tila who attacked the apartment, killed Seekit, and taken the information, all because she was on the payroll of the Shadow Broker. That had led to a chase out of the center with Liara leading the charge, throwing Shadow Broker agents out her way with a biotic fury she had only seen in Ruko when she was really angry. It turned into a skycar chase and Naruto was at the wheel. Miranda had gotten into the back seat, and thus was treated to Naruto's style of driving. After that, she was never going to let him take the wheel again. It had been like he was trying to hit the edge of every building and car that dared came close to theirs. But the truly horrifying thing was that when she accused him as such, his reply was Quan Misli is worse. The chase, thankfully, came to an end when Naruto was able to slam his car into hers and force her into the path of a third car. She crash-landed on a tall building whose roof was multi-layered and had the look of a restaurant. They landed on the same roof and went looking for her, but she had already called for backup and they had to fight their way to her car. From there, they followed the blood trail and found her in the midst of a party. That was something Miranda was not going to forget in a long time. Flashback. Vaser! Called out Liara as she walked onto the patio. The people standing around looked like they were in the midst of a dinner party and looked confused as the Asari and 2 humans walked amongst them with weapons drawn. They noticed the blood trail and followed it to the wounded Asari. Tila looked around, trying to find something that would get her out of here. Her eyes found a human waitress standing around with a tray of drinks. Hey! Hey you! Come here, she called out. The waitress turned to look at her with a confused look. Using her biotics, she flashed to her side, knocking down her tray, and grabbing her by the neck. What's your name? She asked into her ear, pulling her out her gun and pointing it at the 3 of them. The rest of the party screamed at the sight of the gun and ran for cover. In less than 5 minutes, the entire patio was emptied save for them. The waitress squirmed in her arms, being able to feel and see the gun against her head. And Mariana, she said, whimpering a little bit. Personally, the Asari could not stand whimpering. But she would put up with it for now. Mariana, you want to live, don't you? She asked, her voice a whisper in her ear. She looked across at the 2 humans and 1 Asari. Tell those people that you want to live. Mariana looked at them with a silent plea. Please, she said to them. I don't have a clear shot, Miranda thought, trying to find one. But Tila kept herself well hidden behind the waitress. If this was less of a delicate situation, she would have gladly used her biotics to throw her away from the waitress. It might have caused Mariana some harm, maybe even a broken limb, but she would live. Now that wasn't the case. But Naruto did something she didn't expect him. He holstered his gun and stepped forward, out into the silently designated no man's land. Don't worry, Mariana, he told her reassuringly. You'll get out of here safely. She didn't speak, but Tila did. Well, that's good to hear. She's not a part of this, Tila. She became a part of this when you decided to stick your nose in this business, she replied with a scowl. All you had to do was walk away. Now it gets ugly. She pointed the gun's barrel against the waitress's head. Please, Mariana whimpered, tears leaking out of her eyes. All she could feel was the barrel. I have a son. A son? She repeated, rolling the word across her tongue. It was delicious to hear and know. I hope he gets to see you again. I've heard losing a parent is just horrific for children. Scars them for life, she remarked casually, like she was stating a fun fact. Liara almost pulsed with her biotic power. I'm going to end you, Vaser, she growled. It's all right, Liara, Naruto told her, keeping his eyes on the other specter. His hands stayed to his sides. She'll be taken care of. Tila jerked her back so she covered her more. You want Mariana's little boy to grow up without a mommy, Uzumaki? She called out. Oh, I don't know, he said easily. I didn't have any parents and I turned out fine. He looked at Mariana, who had a slightly shocked look on her face. Hey, is there a father in the picture? She nodded slightly. Ah, good, so he won't be completely alone. Seeing that the threat wouldn't do it, the Asari went for the direct approach, pressing the barrel harder against the human's head. Clips on the ground now, she ordered. Power cells too. He shrugged his shoulders. All right, fine, he said in reply, pulling out his guns and laying them down on the ground. Guys, do it. Liara and Miranda shared a look that spoke their confusion. But there was nothing that they could do, not while she had a hostage. So they had to do what Naruto told them to do. Good, Tila thought in satisfaction. Now she had to make sure that she got out of here alive. She then noticed that Naruto was still kneeling on the ground. What are you doing? Get up. I'm getting, he replied, standing up slowly. You know, Tila, it was a smart call to have us drop our weapons. But you forgot something about me. What's that? I'm old-fashioned. His hands snapped up and threw the futon-enhanced shuriken he had palmed at her. They flew through the air, one of them managing to curve around to the side in order to slice through the hand holding the gun. The other shuriken sheared her other arm off at the elbow. Without her gun hand or hostage-holding arm, all she could do was scream in pain while the waitress fled. Miranda took the shot, getting her in the stomach, while Liara used her biotics to throw a table at her. She flew through the air and landed hard against the edge of the roof. Her armor cracked as she landed and she heard something snapping in her body, possibly one of her ribs, perhaps multiple ribs. The bottom line was that she was in pain. Damn it! Damn it! She groaned in pain, reaching for the wall to help her stand. If she could reach her comm, she'd be able to call in reinforcements. Reaching for the comm would be tricky, but she was sure she could do it. But as she turned around, she found herself looking at the business end of a Warhawk pistol. If I were you, I wouldn't try to call in reinforcements, Naruto told her as he stood over her along with Miranda and Liara. It wouldn't really help you. She glared up at him but stopped moving all the same. Liara reached down and pulled out the data log she had pocketed back at the trade center. She opened up her Omni-tool and loaded the data. Well? Miranda asked, looking over at her. She didn't look back at her, instead choosing to look at the commander. Sakat's personal datapad, she announced. This has what we need to find the Shadow Broker. You're dead, Tila spat up at all of them. The Shadow Broker has been in power for decades. He's stronger than anything you've ever faced. Naruto scoffed at that. Say that after you've faced a Shinju on a rampage and a man who wielded its power. Besides, the words of a traitor don't really mean that much. Her eyes widened at his implication and she weakly snarled. You think I betrayed the council? Like Saren? Go to hell. Miranda looked down at her in obvious disbelief. So you're not a traitor then? She asked, making the question sound obvious. The broker's given me good intel over the years. Intel that saved lives and kept the Citadel safe. So if the broker needs a few people to disappear, I'll pay that price without hesitation. Naruto went still at those words. Kurama, he said inside his mind. I'm getting that same feeling, Naruto, the fox replied. To them both, she reminded them of Danzo a little too much. She saw the look on his face and mistook it for judgment. What? You think that specters aren't supposed to go around blowing up buildings and harming innocents? Don't be so fucking naive. Of course we do. We get our hands dirty so that the council doesn't have to. The counselors might complain about our methods to soothe their consciences, but they never look too closely. Besides, she added with a disgusted note, you're with Akatsuki. You have any idea what your terrorist friends have done? They're not my friends, he replied bluntly. And this isn't about me or what they've done. I think it is. You want to judge me? Look in the mirror. You're just like me, so don't you dare judge me. Don't you? Her breath was getting weaker, and she could feel her vision getting darker. But before it went completely dark, she felt something cool against her side, and suddenly it felt like her body was re-energized. She could feel her bones beginning to reknit themselves, and the pain in her arms began to go numb. Her vision, as did the rest of her senses. She felt a slight minty taste in her throat. She knew that taste. It was the taste of Medigel. She looked down and saw the remains of Pac against her side. She looked up and saw Naruto kneeling down in front of her. Why? First off, he said, cutting her off, never talk to me about getting my hands dirty. I've waded through muck, shit, and blood so others could see a safe and protected world long before you were born. I also know that you can never serve two authorities at the same time. You call yourself a council specter, but you're more of a dog for the shadow broker, barking and biting at his command. She looked disdainfully at him. Like you're any better, she replied. He returned the look. There's a difference between serving an authority and serving a purpose. Is this why you gave me the Medigel? To lecture me? She demanded. If that was the case, she didn't need it. No, I just wanted to make sure you were fully conscious to completely feel what comes next. He grabbed her by the throat and lifted her up off the ground and into the air. His grip wasn't tight enough that she started losing oxygen, but it was tight enough that she couldn't get free even if she could. His visor lifted and his blue eyes were like icy blizzards bearing down on her. I would have been content to let you bleed to death, Tila. But you crossed a line. You threatened a woman with the idea that her child would grow up without her. That is something I have never abided with, and will never abide. So you're going to die much more painfully now than you would have if you had kept your mouth shut. With his little speech said and done, he tossed her over the side of the building. They all watched as she fell through the sky of Ilium. She was probably screaming, but they couldn't hear her over the sky cars. She kept falling and falling until she became nothing but a mere speck down below. And then that speck vanished. Miranda didn't know if it was because she had simply gone out of sight or because a sky car hit her. Naruto turned and walked away. They followed him. End flashback. Once they had the information they needed, Liara had suggested that they take the Normandy to reach the location. While it had been a good idea, Naruto vetoed it. His defense was that he wasn't going to leave parts of his team on Ilium. They would just have to borrow another ship to get there. That was what they had done after gathering the rest of their squad. Miranda's hope was that the shadow broker didn't catch them until it was too late. The shuttle that came with the ship rattled as they went through the atmosphere. Inside, everyone jostled around in their seats. Sorry, Musashi called from the pilot's seat. That was rougher than I had thought it would be. Just what kind of place is this anyway? Jacob asked. Hagalaz, Liara answered. She was sitting not next to Naruto but close. Bless you, Kasumi said to her from where she sat right next to her. She didn't bother to give the thief a look of annoyance, mainly because she was trying to remain composed and calm amidst all the shaking and rattling. The oceans boil during the day, then snap freeze 10 minutes after sundown. It's a dangerous planet, Miranda said, acknowledging what the Asari had said. Only a man or who wanted to hide would try and live here. Case in point, Shadow Broker, Morden declared. Yes, Liara agreed with a nod of her head. His ship follows the sunset. Completely undetectable in the storm, unless you know where to look, she told them all. And that's something we do know, thanks to your information, Musashi remarked. Even though he was talking, he was also making sure that the shuttle made through the storm in one piece. Naruto looked at Liara. So how do we get into the ship and out of the storm? He asked. The shuttle bay is locked down, she replied. We'll need to land on the ship and hunt for a hatch. Wait, you want us to do what now? Jacob asked her, looking a little more than surprised at what she said. Kasumi was no less disturbed. She just had a better time of hiding it. I think she just said that we're going to land on the outside of a ship in the middle of a planet-wide storm that never stops. Of all the things she had done in her career, that had to be one of the most insane things to even consider. Liara nodded. That's exactly what I mean. But we can't stay outside for long. There's a constant lightning storm where the hot and cold air collide. So not only are we going to moving through the outside of a ship in the middle of a planet-wide storm that never stops, we're also going to trying to get into the ship while avoiding possible lightning strike, is that it? She asked rhetorically. Morden said to himself, deep in thought. When put like that, chances of survival do not seem promising. I think that would be underselling the point, Morden, Jacob told him. Also a probability, he conceded. Then all eyes turned to Naruto. He looked at them with a puzzled look. What? This is usually the point you say something about your past, and how you've been through worse that reassures us, Miranda told him. Reassures you? She nodded. It wasn't something she would have admitted at the beginning of their time together. But now she was willing to admit whenever she heard a tale of his past, it made her feel like they would be able to get through whatever it was that was standing before them. But he only shook his head. Sorry, nothing I've been through ever dealt with a planet-wide storm. Their faces fell slightly at his words and he knew they were disappointed. No need to tell me, he said to the Biju before any of them could open their mouths. I'm already on it. I wasn't going to say anything, Matatabi replied. Was anyone else? Why would I say anything? Shikaka asked. I think your mind's going, Naruto. Now there's no need to be rude, Shikaku, Saiken told him. It's clear that he was mistaken, no need to drive it home. Gyuki nodded in agreement with him. We weren't going to say anything. Of course not, Isaba said, nodding his head as well. Then why are we having this conversation? Chome wondered. Who knows, Kurama said. You should get back to what you were going to be talking about, Gaki. He mentally rolled his eyes at them but did get back to the topic on hand. The closest I've ever gotten to something like this was during my trip with Jiraiya, he told his team. He decided to take me fishing with a fisherman friend of his, and we ended up getting stuck in the middle of a typhoon. They all stared at him in sheer disbelief. A typhoon? Repeated Jacob. Yeah, a typhoon, he said. You're joking. Why would I joke about a typhoon? I lived through one. And it's not like we saw it on the horizon and decided to wait around, he chastised the man with a slight admonishing tone. It snuck up and caught us unawares. Why didn't you try to sail away once you knew it was there? Kasumi asked him. He turned the look onto her. Have you ever tried sailing a ship out of a typhoon? It's damn near impossible. It was all we could do to batter down the hatches and keep the ship afloat. The thing was just as ancient as the fisherman, and I could have sworn that it would have broken down many times over if we hadn't been running around trying to fix it. How did you keep ship afloat? Morden asked. He looked a little interested in the talk. But Naruto just shrugged his shoulders. I don't know if there's an actual way to do it or not. I just know that we used a lot of duct tape and chakra. He could see the look forming on the Solarian's face. Don't ask me how that worked, I'm not sure either. I was pumping a lot of adrenaline. The more he thought about that day, he remembered something else. It made him smile. And the thing was, I had something catch my line just as the typhoon hit, and it held throughout. I spent as much time trying to catch that fish as I was making sure that the ship stayed in one piece. Did you catch whatever it was on your line? Jacob asked him, curious to know. At the end of it, yes. I was never sure what it was exactly, but the old fisherman was excited to see it, and it fed his village for about a month. While he talked, Liara stood up and walked over to the window. She looked out at the storm, her eyes straining to see through the clouds and find their destination. She hoped that they wouldn't get caught. If they were found before they could find the ship, they wouldn't be able to land on it. Of course, that was why Musashi offered to fly the shuttle, and why she would have refused letting Naruto take the controls. Once was enough for her. But as she looked through the window, something came into view out of the clouds. It was a vague shape at first, but it rapidly took the shape that she wanted to see. We're here, she announced. They all shifted in their seats at those two words. The mood changed. Weapons check, Naruto ordered, already pulling out his set of kunai and shuriken, making sure that they were clean and sharp. Once that was settled, he went for the guns. He checked them over, making sure there wasn't rust, the slides were in proper condition, and the ejection ports for both thermal and chakra clips were working properly. He didn't need to look up to see the others doing the same thing that he was. He heard them. Once he was sure the guns were fine, as he knew they would, but better to be safe than sorry, he reached into his pouch and brought out the chakra clips. He considered what he had in his hand for a moment. The first one he picked was Futon, sliding it into the right Warhawk. He considered the others and finally picked the Katon clip. Once he was done, he held the rest out to Jacob. "Thanks, Commander, but I'll be sticking to thermal for now," he said, shaking his head briefly. "If I need to change it out, I've got my own set." "All right then," he said back, putting the clips away. The ship was coming closer and they were about to set down. Time to play the game. The shuttle landed on the side of the ship, opened up, and the team jumped out. Even before their feet touched the hull, the wind was howling all around them, and tried to pull at them to fall into oblivion. "Oh hell, this was worse than I was expecting," Musashi exclaimed as he kept a tight grip on his Bakken. "Wind speed, gale level at least," shouted Morden. While he wasn't panicking per se, there was a tone to his voice that said he was concerned. "Maybe we should keep moving," Jacob suggested. "Yes. Good idea." "Liara, where to?" called out Naruto, looking over at her. She raised her arm and quickly consulted her Omni tool, linking it up to her visor's screen. "It's hard to pinpoint in this lightning," she said, "but I'm picking up signals from a communication array near the back of the ship. There's nothing below but maintenance equipment. We have to find an entrance near the back shielding. Then that's where we're going." He looked over Musashi and saw that he was still holding his Bakken. "Hey, if you've got a gun, use it." "I would have to take my hand off the Bakken to do that," the former cop told him. "So do it." "If I do it, it'll fly away in this wind and that is something I cannot allow." "He does seem rather attached to that Bakken," Gyuki remarked. "Considering how many times that thing has saved his ass, I'm not going to begrudge him it." The blonde gave a small shake of his head but said, "Fine, stay in the back and don't attack unless you absolutely have to." "Got it?" He nodded. "I do." As they made their way down the ship's hull, they had to be careful with the wind. They could manage to walk just fine, but any other kind of action could not be done carelessly. It had to be done carefully lest they get blown off. When they climbed over a flap on the hull, there was a humming sound in the wind. Liara spoke out, "Maintenance drones." Two of the drones, orb-shaped and red-colored, came floating towards them. Once they were close, they started shooting at them, forcing them all to try and dodge. "Why are they shooting at us?" Miranda demanded. "They must think we're debris from the storm." "Just shoot them," Jacob said, firing his machine gun in short bursts at the drones. Everyone else did the same thing, ignoring the return fire, and were able to destroy the drones quickly. They moved up the ship, going higher as they reached the center portion of it. When they were there, they could see lightning striking the ship but nothing actually happening to it. They were just absorbed into machines on each side of the pathway. "Careful," Liara warned before anyone could take a step. "Those capacitors' discharge built up lightning." "Duly noted," Naruto told her. He started to step forward, but there were other people coming up the path towards. He recognized them instantly as Shadow Broker agents. "Oh great," Musashi remarked. "We have company." "Naruto, try firing at the capacitors," shouted Liara over the sound of the wind. He saw what she was suggesting and did just that. The two shots rang out from his guns and hit both capacitors just as they stepped between them. If there was any actual sound of lightning, it was lost in the wind's howl. But he could see the lightning itself dance and arc across the agents, making them go still and shake before falling down to the ground. As he looked at their dead bodies, he had the oddest feeling and acted on it. "Kasumi, don't say it." "Ah," the thief said, albeit good naturally. "Not even one?" "No. Let's keep moving." She followed him as did the others. "How did you know I was going to say something anyway?" "I had a feeling." "That's it?" "Yeah," he answered honestly. "Did you used to do what you were going to do when we worked together?" "Every chance that I got," she answered without any shame. "I always found it to be fun." "You didn't say anything about back then." They went back down the left side. "Circumstances are a bit more serious, wouldn't you say?" She scoffed. "Not so serious if the Shadow Broker's using Loki mechs to try and stop us," she remarked as she lifted her submachine gun and fired off a burst of 3 shots. They smashed into the mech trying to use a curve of the machine to protect itself without much success. He raised his pistols and started shooting too, getting the mech behind it. "You never know," he replied. The third mech was caught by Liara's biotics and thrown off the ship and into the storm. The path went back upwards to the center, and they found another capacitor, and agents waiting for them. This time it was Miranda who fired off the shot that electrocuted them to death. The path is blocked, she told the others over the wind. How so? Asked Morden. She started to explain what it was that she was seeing even though he was coming up beside. It looks like a kind of rod that is a part of the ship. It appears movable. He looked past the capacitor and found a lever in a secluded little alcove. Found controls to move it. One quick pull up and the rod up and back, out of sight of them. But when the rod moved back, they found themselves looking at a group of shadow broker agents waiting for them. Naruto shot first, hitting one of the capacitors on the other side. Lightning snapped out and struck the agents that were the closest. Some tried to get away to find cover, but those on Naruto's team who had biotics used them to drag out of cover. When they were out, either they were shot down or the lightning took care of them. It was a short battle and they were glad for it. They went over to the other side of the ship and then down. The path downwards was steep and almost made them slide down instead of walking. Not a few of them chose to look down, whether on accident or purpose, and snapped their heads back. Oh boy, that's a long way down, Naruto thought to himself. Just breathe, Naruto, Kurama told him. Just breathe. What do you think I was doing? He asked with a snap. Practicing my kunai juggling? We both know that you never did that again after getting your hand cut to the bone doing that. Just keep moving. He did that, keeping his eyes forward. When they reached a hatch on the path that led in, they took it. Some of them had hoped that they had reached the end of the outside part, and were finally inside. Are we there yet? Kasumi asked with a slight smirk to her lips. Naruto didn't know why she was smirking, but there had to be a reason and he didn't have the time to find out. No, we still have a ways to go, Liara said, checking her Omni tool. She looked at the room they were in and saw the machines shifting up and down constantly against the other wall. The machines were made of panels that shifted up and down in a wave pattern. Lightning crackled and leapt between the panels and the air was humming with energy. She now knew where the lightning was eventually stored and processed. It was a sight that was both impressive and intimidating. She settled for impressive. This ship is incredible, she declared. It must have taken decades to build in secret. So what happened to the people who built this ship? Naruto asked. Commander, please tell me that's a rhetorical question, Miranda said. He considered his words briefly. Right, forget that I said that. It was pretty obvious what had happened to them once he gave it some actual thought. Liara didn't pay much attention to them as they walked through the area. She was still too focused on the machine around them. Navigating this storm is brutal, she told the others. If the ship's engines stop even for a moment. She left the sentence hanging, but they all knew what it was she was saying. It was Musashi who finished her thought. We'll be taking a fatal drop towards the planet, and most likely get destroyed by it. Yes. It was a grim thought that made them all involuntarily think about that possible outcome. Well, there would be some good news that came out of it, Kasumi said, trying to lighten up the mood. Jacob gave her a look of disbelief. What would that be? If we go now, the shadow broker would be going with us. How comforting, Miranda said dryly. The point of the fact would be that they would still be dead. When they reached the other end of the room and saw the door leading back outside, Naruto groaned slightly. Great, back into the howling storm, he grumbled. Shut up and move, son ordered him. He grumbled a curse at the Yonbi but still went through the door. Their walk across the ship's hull led them back over to the other side and again to the right. They didn't run into any more maintenance droids, but there were plenty of shadow broker agents waiting for them. However, it seemed luck was shining down on Naruto and his team because every time they ran into a big group of enemies, they always seemed to find themselves next to capacitors for lightning, and he always made sure that he got the first shot off. The end of their walk came after they went across a bridge with no guardrail, which, in the middle of a storm like this, was a little more than terrifying. There, said Liara as they walked up the ramp and saw a hatch just ahead of them. That hatch leads directly to the communication signals. Thank the saints for that, Jacob breathed in relief. She walked up to the hatch and scrutinized it closely. It's locked, she finally declared. He groaned slightly. Of course it is. Expecting different outcome? Morden asked with a tone of admonishment. Can't blame me for hoping, he retorted. Of course not. Can blame you for expecting things to be easy. Naruto said to them both, guys, don't get distracted. Keep an eye out. Liara, I'm assuming you've got some way to get in. Yes, she said with a nod. Just hang on, I've got a bypass shunt program that can crack it. She approached the hatch, activating her Omni tool in the process. How long are we looking at here? He asked her as she went to work. I don't know, Naruto. I've never broken into the Shadow Broker's base before. There was a good amount of sarcasm in her voice when she spoke, keeping her eyes focused on the hatch. Then it was lost when she added, well, not this one, anyway. We have incoming, Miranda warned the others. He swung his head back to the open area and saw that Shadow Broker agents were converging on their position. Crap, he muttered, defensive formations, everyone. They don't get anywhere near Liara. Musashi, you guard her. The ex-cop nodded and went to guard the Asari while the others took positions that would hold the enemies, standing or crouching behind high raises. As they converged, Naruto noticed that they weren't going anywhere near the capacitors on either side of the ship. I guess they figured it out. Pity, Chomei remarked. Yeah, he agreed, already opening fire at a burly-looking agent that was getting too close. The burliness of the agent couldn't stop his bullets. The man stumbled back, his shields gone, and he soon fell to the ground dead. They kept coming and Naruto's team returned fire just as much. With the storm howling all around them and the lightning flashing, along with the general chaos that came with battle, things became a bit blurry and formulaic to the blonde shinobi. Neither his team nor the agents stayed in one place as they fought. They moved around, trying to get a better vantage point or a chance to get close to Liara and take her out for the agents. They never really had that chance because every time they got close, Naruto or someone else would kill them. As time dragged on, Naruto dared to look back at the hatch. To his dismay, Liara was still working on it. Is that thing actually working? He called out to her. It's illegal even on Ilium, she called back to him. It didn't come with a warranty. Not what I asked? I mean, you have used that thing before, right? He got a silence from her that he didn't particularly like. One agent got too close to him, forcing him to kick him away and shooting him through the head. Liara, you have used the thing before, right? You might want to look out, she told him. There's one coming right at you. He saw the agent, an Asari this time. She was beginning to flare her biotics, and it was obvious what she was planning to do. He got in close, kicked her legs out from under her, and broke her rebreather with his gun's hilt. Her eyes widened in panic as she lost air. Within seconds she was dead. You mean you haven't? He demanded of Liara. No time to talk, she replied, already sounding busy. He couldn't believe that she would do something like this. You've got to be kidding me. He mentally complained as he fended off another agent, grabbed hold of her, and tossed her towards Miranda. She took one look at the flying human, flared her biotics to grab hold of her, and promptly threw away from the ship. You know, she kinda reminds me of you right now, Kurama remarked casually. Don't start, he said instantly. I don't need it. I'm aware. Go back to the fight. He ducked down behind a high raise, avoiding a shotgun blast that would have hit his head if he had stayed put. Thank you for your permission. He rose back up and fired back, catching the Solarian holding the shotgun right in the chest, leaving holes there before he was caught afire. He moved under fire to Jacob's position, a high raise over. How we looking? He asked. Jacob stood up momentarily, fired off a quick burst, and knelt back down. I think they're starting to thin out, he answered. They both stood and saw agents coming at them. It almost doesn't look like that, the shinobi thought to himself as he started shooting at the agents alongside Jacob. They managed to get an agent apiece before the agents dove for cover. They popped back up and the two groups started trading shots with each other. While they weren't really getting hurt, they also knew that they weren't doing any actual damage to them. Got any ideas on how to flush them out? Jacob asked Naruto. He did have an idea. Got a flashbang? Yeah, I do. He pulled the grenade and handed it to the blonde. He stood up quickly and threw it at the spot where their agents were huddling, ducking back down so he wouldn't be hit himself. They both heard it go off and stood up to pick off the dazed agents. It worked like a charm and they didn't have to deal with 3 more agents. Naruto left Jacob and headed for Kasumi's position. She was farther away from Jacob but was also closer to Liara and Musashi. Liara, how we doing? He called out once he was in cover. I'm sure it won't be much longer, she replied, still working furiously at the hatch. You know, Kasumi said conversationally as she leaned out of cover and fired off a shot, I distinctly remember a time when a little Omnigel went a long way. That security upgrade made a lot of people unhappy, the Asari said in agreement. The fight continued to drag on. Naruto kept shooting every agent that tried getting to him, and avoiding shots aimed at him. At one point he thought that there were rocket drones, but he didn't really see them. He heard them, but it could have been the wind. If there were drones, the others must have taken care of them. There! Liara shouted for all of them to hear. The hatch is open! As soon as they all heard those words, they fell back to the hatch and went through it. The hatch closed behind them and they all breathed a quick sigh of relief, standing in a corridor that led into the ship. Glad that's over with, Jacob declared. More likely to come, Morden replied. I know, but it won't be in a wind that would have thrown us off the ship if we weren't careful. Inside the ship, that howling wind turned into something of a dull roar, like something he would have felt with a morning hangover. Acceptable point, he conceded. Wait a minute, Musashi said, frowning. Weren't there people still outside when we came through? That might be a problem when we leave. At this point, I am more concerned about the agents we're going to encounter inside this ship rather than outside it, Miranda told him. As if to prove her point, Shadow Broker agents came down the other end of the hallway, guns pointing at them. They dove for cover on either side of the corridor just as the bullets started firing. You need to stop saying things like that, Miranda! Jacob shouted at her over the bullets. More of them? Asked Liara. How many guards does the Shadow Broker have? Does that matter? Everyone, return fire! Ordered Naruto, except for you, Musashi. You're getting close and using the Bakken. Musashi just stared at him. Say what now? You gotta earn your pay somehow. Don't worry, we'll provide cover fire. He leaned over and started shooting. So get a move on. He glared but pulled out his Bakken and readied himself. I hate you so much right now, Commander. Wouldn't be the first time somebody said that to me, he replied, still shooting. They're going into cover. Move now. The former CSCC tore out of his cover and barreled down the corridor, keeping his Bakken close and pointed. When he reached the other side, the agents were coming out of hiding. He lunged into a stabbing motion, getting the Solarian right in the eye. Ai! Screamed the Solarian as he stumbled back, clutching the eye. Musashi ducked low and finished his legs off, making him fall to the ground completely. One more bash to the head and he was gone. The other two agents turned their attention onto him, but he was already turning towards the one with the missile launcher, swinging the Bakken up in a rising cut that knocked it out of his hands. After that, it only took another 2 hits to drop him. Musashi turned to the other guard, but he was already dead from bullets from the team. He lowered the Bakken slightly as they approached him. Thanks for the assist. You're welcome, Liara said to him. There were stairs behind Musashi that led up to a door. Since that was where they wanted to go, that's where they went. The door opened and they saw more agents coming at them in a tight group. That just made them easy pickings for a biotic to bowl them over. But Miranda decided to go with a popfly. She threw her biotics in an underhand toss at their feet. They were sent up into the air, and that made them good targets for the guns. When they did finally fall back down to the ground, they weren't as much as shot to death as they were shredded. The corridor beyond the door led off to the left, and it seemed like agents were trying to block their way every couple of steps. They did not stop to take a pitched shootout. Naruto and Musashi took to the front, attacking any of the enemies that decided to press their luck, ending them with a few quick strikes. While they fought, the rest of the team gave them cover and took out the agents at the back. It was an effective tactic that allowed them to reach the end of the corridor and go up the stairs. Just as they reached the first step, Liara spoke. I've downloaded the ship's layout. We're headed to the prison block, and Furin. There was nothing else said, not as they approached the top of the stairs. An agent saw them as they came up. Marks in the interior, he barked into the comm D-point, regroup. Start shooting. Naruto ordered, snapping his own guns up and firing at the agent until he was down. He saw that other agents were coming from other doors. Split up. Take more ground. He moved forward and took cover behind the end of a nearby wall. Liara knelt down behind him, shattering the glass above them so she could get a shot off. Bullets rang off over their heads, hitting the wall behind them. He looked over the edge and saw 2 of the agents standing on the other side. Liara popped them up. You got it. She glowed blue and threw out her hand. The agents cursed as they floated up into the air. It stopped when Naruto put a couple of bullets in their heads. A third body went flying through the air, knocking the first back down to the ground. Were those dead already? Musashi asked. They are now, Liara answered. Naruto looked down at where the ex-cop was. Just how hard did you hit that Turian? I sent him flying, didn't I? The rest of the fight didn't last much longer, and once the bodies were on the floor, Liara went to the room that they had been trying to protect. She tried opening it, but the light turned red. Damn it, it's locked, she groused. She opened her Omni tool and worked at it for a second. The light turned green and the door opened. Naruto came up behind her, as did the rest of the team. They moved into the room with guns drawn, but it soon became evident that the guns had been on the outside. Naruto lowered his pistols and took a look around. They were standing on the high end of the room. The room itself lowered into something of a pit, and there was also a chair in the middle of it that had screens all around the back, streaming information. There was a glass window above the chair with computer screens recording details. Sitting in the chair was a Drell, his head lolling to the side. Furin! Called out Liara. It was enough to wake him up. Liara? He called back weakly, barely able to lift his head. She raced to the ramp leading down to the computer. Hold on, we're getting you out of here. As she reached for the keyboard, he barked out a pained no. She pulled her hands away from the keyboard, but it was too late, she had touched it. The chair discharged a violent electrical shock and he screamed in great pain. Furin, she said worriedly. Naruto reached her side and looked down at the Drell. What the hell was that? He asked. The equipment is sensitive to tampering, Furin explained. This chair plugs into the broker's info network. You have to shut off the power. Pull me out now, and my brain cooks. Liara was already opening her Omni tool and the schematics to the ship. Do you know where we can cut the power? It won't be easy. You'll have to go to Central Operations. Why are you even in the chair in the first place? Musashi asked him. I don't. His words morphed into screams as the chair discharged another shock. His screaming echoed throughout the room. Kami above! Swore Naruto. Who touched the computer? It wasn't me, Kasumi replied from where she stood against the wall. Not me, Musashi said, next to her. I've been standing here, Jacob told him, standing at the ramp and keeping an eye on the door. And I already know not to touch the computer, Miranda remarked from where she stood on his right. Then who touched it? He asked. He looked over to his left at the Asari standing next to him. She met his gaze with her own. I already touched it once. Do you think me so foolish to try it again? It could just be that the shadow broker has a control on the chair. Oh great, so he can just kill Furin whenever he feels like it? He demanded. No, that wouldn't work. The chair has a neuro-grounding rod. She looked back at the chair and him. The medical equipment is to make sure he doesn't expire. She looked back at her Omni tool. We're going to be fighting through a lot of people already, Jacob told her, still keeping an eye on the door. Do we really want to add more to that? I'd like to know where the hell this guy is getting all these people in the first place, Musashi remarked. It's not like he has an army on standby, right? Of course he can, Furin answered, his voice straining against itself. He raised his own private force. They're completely loy, af. He screamed suddenly, suffering through another shock. Liara looked at them all with a slightly harried look. We don't have the time for this. Hold on, Liara, Naruto said to her before looking at Furin. Can you tell us anything about the broker himself? The Drell lifted his head back up. He did this to me. I would like something a little more concrete than that. Perhaps a description of the guy. Would that be possible? I never got a good look, but he's big. The guards are terrified of him. A Krogan? Asked Liara. I don't know, but not everyone who visits his office comes back out. He suffered another discharge, and his mouth opened in a scream. Commander, please, she said to Naruto. All right, he said back before looking at Furin. Everyone's getting out of here. Good, the Drell said back. Central Operations is down the hall. He paused to breathe, something that sounded labored. You know the shadow broker is waiting for you, right? If he wasn't, he wouldn't be good at his job. We'll be back for you, Furin, Liara promised. Despite the condition he was in, he was able to give them a dry smile. I'll try not to go anywhere. Both Liara and Naruto were angry as they left the cage. It was so potent that they didn't even hesitate to slaughter the agents who had been ordered to come down and take care of them. As the team made their way through the nearby door and up the stairs, they left broken and bloody bodies in their path. No one said a word as to the damage down. They were far too interested in getting the job down. But as they reached the door to Central Operations, Miranda spoke. Commander, Dr. Tsoni, please stop. Naruto did stop, but he also looked back at her. I beg your pardon? She looked him in the end, refusing to back down. Liara gave her the same look, but still she didn't back down. You're about to go into a fight angry. I didn't think that was what Shinobi did. It depends on the anger. Does it matter? Liara asked, her voice almost turning into a growl. The Shadow Broker is going to die. She looked at the Asari warningly. That's what I'm talking about, right there. If you go into this fight like that, he's going to win. As she talked, Naruto began to calm down, and saw what she was trying to say. The anger that they had going for them at the moment wasn't the kind that they needed. It wasn't focused anger. It was wild anger, the kind that came from seeing friends and people known being tortured before their eyes. He had experience with that kind of anger. The first couple of times he had blazed through, hoping to reach the source of his anger, but ended up only making things worse. She's right. Liara looked at him. Commander, she started to say. She's right, Liara. We're both too angry about what's happened. We need to take a moment and breathe. We must calm down. She still looked angry but breathed the same as he did. As she breathed, she could feel her anger cooling. It wasn't gone by any means, but she was able to focus her mind on what had to happen. Naruto watched her breathe. When she lost that fire in her eyes, he knew that she had calmed. But he still had to make sure. You good? He asked her. She nodded. Then they both turned to the door and walked through it as it opened. On the other side of the door, they entered a room that was too big and wide to be actually called that. It was more like a circular meeting hall that had been converted into an office space. The central area was marked by 4 columns around it. Between 2 of the columns sat a desk and the Shadow Broker himself. Like Fern had said, the broker was big, but since there were so lights shining down on him, he was cloaked in shadows and could be seen directly. All Naruto could see of him was his outline, but it was enough to tell him that whoever the Shadow Broker was, he wasn't a species of alien the blonde had met before. Everyone came forward and pointed their guns at him, but he did not move from his desk. The only thing he did do was simply place his hands on the desk. The silence dragged on for seconds. They started looking at one another, trying to figure out what to do. If they attacked recklessly, they would probably set off a trap. They had to be smart about this. Finally, the Shadow Broker spoke. Here for the drill? His voice was deep and reverberated through the room, a bass being played slowly. It was also calm and patient, like what was happening right in front of him wasn't of importance. Reckless, even for you, Commander, he remarked. Clearly, you don't know me all that well, Naruto replied. Besides, you can't talk, not after Ilium. Extreme but necessary, he said shortly. Liara spoke and it was a snap to her voice. No, it wasn't. Neither caging Furin for almost 2 years, she said to him. It seemed like he barely moved his head to look at her. Dr. Tsoni, he said. Your interference caused all this. Furin betrayed me when he tried to help you take Uzumaki's body. The Drell is simply paying the price. Hey, don't talk about me like I'm not here, Naruto ordered him. If there was one thing he hated, it was people talking about him like he wasn't in the room. The Shadow Broker looked at him. Even though he couldn't see eyes or even a head, he got a feeling like he was being examined, as if he was a body on a table. You fetched a fair price once. I had a nice price from the collectors for you, but the tribe tripled it. But now, the collector's offer still stands. You really think that you're going now? You practically have no one else on this ship. They're replaceable. Your arrival is barely an interruption. Enough talk. My operations are too crucial to be compromised by a traitor. You're quite confident for someone with nowhere left to hide, Liara remarked. The shadowed head looked over at her. You travel with fascinating companions, Doctor. His head began to look at the other people in the room. I'm obliged you brought along Ms. Gotu, Tsoni. That gray box she's hiding is priceless. And at least you brought me Mr. Taylor and Ms. Lawson. Their deaths will cripple the Akatsuki. Thank you for also bringing me Oker's project. His dissection will be interesting. You brought me the Solarian too, Tsoni. Krogan pay well for former Special Task Group members. Certainly not least of all, the Demon of Torfan has come with you. I'm sure that his clan will want him back, along with his Bakken. They might want that more than him. Liara grew angrier with each word he said. Before he could talk about Naruto, she spoke out. You're not putting a hand on anyone. He looked back at her, and there was this sense of disdain. It's pointless to challenge me, Asari. I know your every secret, while you fumble in the dark. Is that right? She asked, a smirk coming to her lips. You say that while you hide in that same dark. Perhaps you're afraid to show yourself. Without any warning, she flared her biotics so brightly that everyone near her was blinded. Naruto had to look away to avoid seeing the light, but it still pierced his eyes. God, that's bright, he thought to himself. A little warning would have been nice. Where would the fun be in that? Kurama asked him. When the light died down and everyone was getting their eyesight back, Liara still had that smirk on her face. It was even wider now. I know what you are, she said to the shadow broker. You're a Yag, a pre-spaceflight species quarantined to their homeworld for massacring the Council's first contact teams. This base is older than your planet's discovery, which probably means you killed the original shadow broker 60 years ago, then took over. I'm guessing you were taken from your world by a trophy hunter who wanted a slave. She paused for a moment, then delivered the final blow, or a pet. How am I doing? I've said it before and I'll say it again, Shikaku declared as he stared in awe of the Asari. I approve. As Rex would say, she's developed a quad, Gyuki remarked, sounding just as impressed as the Achibi. Hang on, Sun said, watching the shadow broker. He's moving. The shadow broker was indeed moving. He was standing up from his chair, and when he was at his full height, he towered over everyone else. But there was more to him than that. The shadows that had covered him had been centered only on the desk. Once he stood up, they could see him clearly. The first thing that they noticed was his face. It was flat on the surface with a reddish tint for skin and horns twisting up above. Like a Batarian, he had more than one pair of eyes. But instead of having two, he had 4 eyes on each side of his face. He had a mouth, but it wasn't a normal one. Instead of having 2 lips, he technically had 3. The 2 upper lips met where a human nose was before curving down away from each other but meeting the lower lip. But each part of the lips they could see was covered with teeth that were pointed and made for biting. His entire body structure was immensely muscular, and his 3-fingered hands looked like they were able to rip people apart. As they took this all in, they tried to find something that would be able to describe what it was that was currently traveling down their spines. Musashi managed to get a word out, saying big. But that was all he could do. The air in the room seemed tense and a second away from a fight. But then Naruto groaned loudly and his shoulders slumped. Everyone else looked at him like he had lost his mind. What's wrong with you? Kasumi asked. I just realized a truly sad thing, he replied. She stared at him some more. They were about to fight something that was bigger and stronger than possible, all of them combined, and that was what he had to say. What? He pointed a gun at the Yag. That is not the ugliest thing I've seen in this galaxy. She looked at him, then at the Yag, then at him, then at the Yag, then at him, and then at the Yag. She couldn't help what came out of her mouth next. She giggled. In hindsight, that might have been what had lit the rage the Yag was holding back at being caught. With a roar, he slammed his fist down onto his desk, splitting it in half with a sounding crack that echoed in their ears. He was still roaring when he grabbed one of the halves and hurled it at them. Someone shouted, "Look out!" And they all leapt out of the projectile. The shadow broker stepped out from behind his ruined desk with leap. He surveyed his enemies and gave another challenging roar before pulling out a gun that was easily half the length of his long arm and just as thick. The blonde looked over at the thief and said, I think you made him angry. I can see that. When the gun in the shadow broker's hand fired, the gunshots were just as loud as any other gunshots. However, they could feel the impact against the column like a vibration that was set to high. Kami, what kind of gun is that? Musashi demanded as he too felt the vibrations. Miranda had fallen further back than either of them, kneeling down behind a barricade in the outer circle. She looked over the edge and took a look at the gun when it wasn't firing at her. It might an experimental machine gun, she told the others. Experimental or not, that thing is going to chew through these columns, Kasumi told them all. She could feel the bullets getting close and closer through the columns to get to her. Must think of strategy, Morden said, kneeling down beside Miranda. Jacob was on the other side of him, and the barricade was barely wide enough to cover them all. Jacob rose up to try and shoot the shadow broker but had to duck back down when the bullets turned to him. Anyone got any ideas? He asked everyone else. Naruto leaned out and fired off a few shots, which turned the attention back to him. But he did have a plan. We're going with moving rings, he announced to everyone. That old tactic? Said Gyuki in surprise. You sure? Will he be expecting it? No. But he'll catch on before long. So long as he can't hit any us to kill, we'll be fine. What do we do? Kasumi asked him. He prepped himself for the tactic, setting his body into a strafing stance. Move around him in circles, pick your rotation, don't collide with anyone, and take shots when you can. That's insane. You just have to be coordinated. I'll go this way. You go that way. He took off to the right without another word, shooting at the shadow broker with one gun before swapping out. As the Yag turned towards him with an angry snarl, Kasumi muttered a foul word and took off to the left, firing her gun too. Musashi wondered what it was they were doing. In the end, he just stopped wondering and joined in. As Kasumi ran past him, he ran opposite of her and started firing his rifle. Liara was about 5 seconds behind him. Miranda stared at them as they literally ran circles around the shadow broker. What are they doing? She asked. Mordin stared too. He soon realized what they were trying to do. Multiple targets, constant moving, no uniform pattern, meant to distract and confuse target, disallowing opportunity to return fire. Impressive. Jacob was already standing up and over the barricade. Whatever it is, it's working, he said to them both. And we just can't sit here. Excellent point. More people running causes greater confusion, adds to reducing return fire opportunity. He leapt over the barricade just as Miranda stood up. She joined them and the three of them soon joined the rest of them. The shadow broker tried to get a bead on one of them, but every time that he did, someone else would fire at him, usually at his back. His primal instincts would not let that happen lying down, so he would turn and try to fire at them, only to have the process repeated. He could feel his shields being whittled down to nothing, and then his armor began taking the hammering. He kept swinging around and around, trying to get a shot off, but they were all moving too fast and going in and out of sight for him to get one. When he felt the last piece of his armor short, he knew that they would be able to inflict actual damage on him. They probably knew that too, and their hopes would rise. But what they didn't know was that he had an ace up the proverbial sleeve. He growled out a specific voice command and held out his arms in a receiving position. The kinetic conduit above his head pulsed and sent down a charge onto him. It would be a charge that would render him invulnerable to bullets and biotics while also recharging his armor and shields. The only downside was that he would be immobile for a few seconds. But he was confident that they wouldn't attack him. These people, they were too reliant on their guns and biotic power. None of them knew what it was truly like to be in combat, to be an inch away from your opponent's face and wanting to tear it down to shreds. No, they were content to stay back and fight from distance. It wouldn't work. Once he was recharged, he would. He didn't realize that both Musashi and Naruto were on him until they descended upon him. The shinobi went with the tried and true method of his fists, while the former CCC used his bakken. They slammed into his face, on both sides, and he felt pain. It also made him stumble. His shields and armor were restored, but not fully. That would be a problem. But what was more concerning was the fact that they didn't let up. They followed through and continued to attack him. He fended them off, but in the split seconds that they fought, they gave more than they got. His anger growing and showing in his snarl, he pushed them back and activated the Omni shield he had strapped to his left arm, catching Musashi's bakken as it fell down. The sparks literally flew between them as the bakken tried to force the shield down, and vice versa. There, the two of them were locked in a standstill. But where one would see stalemate, Musashi saw opportunity. Shoot him! He ordered the others. The guns snapped up and opened fire. The shadow broker growled at the pain piercing him from all over. I will not die like this, in a trap, he told himself. He tried to free his shield away from the human. Oh no, you don't, the human told him, putting more pressure down on his weapon. You wanted the demon. I'm giving you the demon. He rose the bakken up. The weapon itself took the chakra he offered freely, strengthening itself as he brought it back down and slammed it against the shield. Naruto saw the bakken seemingly eat the chakra that momentarily covered Musashi's hands and gained bright blue veins, like it becoming more powerful. There was something about it that seemed familiar, and not in a good way. Remind me to have a long talk with Musashi when this is over. What are we, your secretaries? Kurama demanded. You'd be sucky ones. Just remind me later, okay? He returned his attention back to the Yag being held in place. He was the closest and kept to the side that didn't have the shield. He also saw the gun on the ground and came to a conclusion. I'm gotta kick the gun away. That way he'll more defenseless. He's got a shield that should belong to a hero, he's got more muscles than and you think he's going to be less defenseless? Gyuki asked. You want him to have all that and still have a gun? Fair enough, continue. Thanks. He kept up his rate of fire but also started edging his way to the gun. He didn't do it blatantly. But due to the Shadow Broker's eyes, all 4 pairs of them, he saw the human and realized what he was trying to do. The action snapped him back into cold rationality, somewhat. He gave Musashi a hard shove with the shield and moved to the gun. He picked it up easily with one hand and pointed it at the human. Oh shit! Naruto thought when he realized that the barrel of the gun was pointing at him. He threw himself out of the way just before the Yag started to pull the trigger. But again, the eyes tracked him and the gun followed. He felt a somewhat cold hand grab the small of his back and pull him away even harder. He landed next to Liara. She had biotically grabbed him. Thanks for the assist. I figured you wouldn't want to be dead, she replied, holding a hand to him. He took it and stood back up. Now what? She asked him. Musashi saw that he didn't have a chance now and was backing off, switching back to his gun. We're going to have to be careful about that shield. It protects most of his front side. So we hit him from the back. Easier said than done, but we might as well do it. He signaled everyone to continue as before but also cautioned them. He didn't want anyone to die because they had gotten reckless. He went left and Liara went right. Within seconds everyone was moving. This time, the Shadow Broker caught onto their game and bunkered down. With the shield protecting his right side, he would force them to come to his left side and shoot him there. But that was also where his gun was. If they came close to his range, they ran the risk of getting shot themselves. His lust for blood was satisfied by this. They would die. It would take some time, but they would die. The fight devolved into a standoff, just like the Shadow Broker wanted. But then something landed beside him. He looked down at it, and saw that it was a grenade. But he also recognized the shape of it. EMP, he realized. He tried to grab it with his hand but it detonated. His shield vanished, and he fell to the ground because of the lack of support. With him down, Naruto descended upon him again. This time, instead of using his fists, he pulled out a couple of kunai. Let's get rid of some of those eyes. If the Shadow Broker lost a few of his eyes, he would be crippled and easier to take out. If he had been younger and back at being a genin, he might have balked at the idea. Hell, it still made him a bit queasy, but he had learned long ago to stuff the queasiness away and do what he had to do. The Shadow Broker saw the pair of kunai coming down at him. He realized what the human was trying to do and was enraged. The Yog race, much like the Batarians, held much pride in their eyes, and one of the first lessons they were always taught to protect them from possible danger. Since his shield hand was free, he punched the human. It was blocked, but he used that to his advantage, swinging the human against the floor like he was a doll. Here you go again, Kurama remarked, remembering the fight between his Jinchuriki and Rex on Vermeer. Naruto angled his body so he landed on his feet. Not so much. He pushed against the Shadow Broker, and it became a struggle of strength. Of course, the Yag had the better strength. He forced Naruto back with a hard shove. This time around, Naruto turned his stumble into a leap backwards. He landed beside Liara. Okay, that didn't work. Liara barely paid him any attention. She was too busy focusing on the conduit that the Shadow Broker had drawn power from. I've got an idea, she told Naruto. If you can get him to bring up that kinetic shield again, I might be able to do something. Look out, Jacob shouted out in warning. His shield is coming back on. The Omni Shield did flicker back to life. The Shadow Broker got back to his feet and roared a challenge at them all. Musashi answered the challenge by charging with his Bakken raised high. It smashed against the Omni Shield and they were again locked in close quarters. Don't worry about me, the ex-cop shouted to them all. Just shoot this ugly son of a bitch. The Yag growled angrily at those words and pushed against him, forcing him back. It dropped the gun and started hammering him with its fist. You heard him, Naruto said, standing up and opening fire once more. Shoot that thing. They all did that, stepping closer and still shooting. The Shadow Broker felt the bullets hit him, going through the tech armor and the shields he had on. He growled angrily, wanting to turn and fight them, but he was being stopped by the Bakken-wielding human. They had stopped the struggle of Shield and Bakken and were now trying to each other. While he had the strength, the demon had the speed and agility to avoid him. When the last of his shields were depleted, he wanted to roar and charge them all, crushing them beneath his feet like they were nothing but mud. But he was smart. He just needed to recharge. Once that was done, he would take care of the shinobi and the demon, and it would be easy pickings from there on. As Naruto saw him stretch out his arms and took the recharging burst from the conduit, he saw the opportunity. "Liara, hit it now!" he called out as he backed away. The others saw him do that and followed his actions save for one. The shadow broker turned to the Asari, but her biotics were already coalescing into her fist. She looked him in the eyes and swung the fist in an uppercut. The biotics flew right up into the conduit, hitting it square in the center, and cracking the glass when it stuck. She brought her arms up, forcing her biotics against the glass even more than before, and then suddenly brought them down. The glass shattered and what was held dropped right onto the shadow broker, sending his entire being into a whole new dimension of pain. His knees went out, and he fell to the ground while his shield cracked and faded away. He could see his skin peeling away in front of his eyes. "No!" he thought in denial through the pain. "This can't be it." He saw Liara standing before him, a victorious look in her eyes. He tried to stand up and lunge for her, a roar already bubbling up from his throat. But his vision was suddenly engulfed in white, and the pain hit a peak. Everyone watched as the shadow broker exploded from the energy being dropped onto him. The shockwave was so strong and violent that they were all knocked to the ground. When it died away, they were able to stand up, with some helping the others, and look back at where the Yag had been moments before. There wasn't a single trace of him left. It was like he had never existed before. The shadow broker was dead. Kasumi was the first to reach the spot, alongside Liara. The thief took a quick to confirm what they were all seeing. She looked back at Naruto and grinned. "Can you say information overload?" He groaned at that, a familiar feeling. "Kasumi. Come on, I'm allowed to say it once," she told him, still wearing that grin. Before anyone could say anything else, a voice spoke out into the room. "Shadow Broker, this is Operative Murat. We had a momentarily connection failure. Can you confirm status?" They all swung their heads to the direction of the voice. It had come from a set of computers that showed blue lines on their screens. One of those lines was red and moving like a voice being monitored. Liara went to it first, moving almost like she was in a dream. Goddess, she realized, this is it. This is where he made contact with his network. "It's all right here." More voices started to talk, each adding their own questions and confusion. Operative Shara requesting update. "Are we still online?" "Shadow Broker, I've lost our feed. We are online and awaiting instructions." More and more lines turned red, each coming with a voice wondering what the hell had happened and if everything was good. They began to build upon themselves, making them sound all distorted and confused. Liara stared at them all, her eyes widening still at the implications. She didn't know what to do. It was all too much. She needed to think. She closed her eyes and tried to shut everything away for a moment. It worked somewhat. Everything did fade away, but she also heard Maya's voice. "You know what you have to do, Sheila. This is what you've been going for this entire time. It's in your grasp. All you have to do is reach out and take it." She opened her eyes and let out a breath that steadied herself. She reached out her fingers and opened a channel to the people checking in. "This is the Shadow Broker," she said. "The situation is under control. We experienced a power fluctuation while upgrading hardware. It disrupted communications momentarily. However, we are now back online. Resume standard procedures. I want a status report on all operations within the next solar day." Shadow Broker out. She closed the channel and stepped away from the computer, watching all the red lines go back to blue. "Goddess of Oceans," Furin's voice said from behind them. She turned around and saw him at the door, his pistol out but at his side. He limped forward towards them. "It's you." "You, how?" he asked. "Well, everyone who's ever seen him in person is dead, so..." It came to him like a sledgehammer. "You're the new Shadow Broker." They all took a moment to digest that news. It didn't seem real. "So, is this good news or bad news?" Isabu asked. "Does it matter to us?" Sun asked. "It might. It's Liara, after all." Naruto looked at the Asari. She looked almost in shock, like she couldn't believe what she had done what she did. You okay, Liara? He asked. You think you can do this? She looked at him. It was either this or lose everything. His contacts, his trading sources, she explained, her voice still shaky. Those will really help us. She looked back at the screen. With the Shadow Broker's information network, I can. She couldn't finish the sentence. Furin didn't really know what to do at this moment. I'll check the power systems. He left almost as quickly as he had left. Some of the others left with him, figuring that some space would be good. The only ones who were left with Liara were Naruto, Miranda, and Jacob. Coward Coco snorted in disdain. Naruto pulled up his visor and walked up to Liara, putting a hand of comfort on her shoulder. She turned around at the touch. Her eyes were full of tears. It's over, she told him. It's finally, for 2 years. Ah geez, Shikaka said. Look at her. She looks like she's about to break down. Would you do something about it already? He demanded of Naruto. Not so crudely, Kurama said, getting a glare from the tanuki for it, but the same thing. It was a good thing Naruto how and what to do. He pulled Liara into a hug. There was a small resistance from her, but it faded and she held onto him like a lifeline. You got him, he told her. Take solace in that. I will. Good. They broke the hug, but he kept his eyes on her. But I want you to do me a favor. What? He looked her right in the eyes and proclaimed, Call Maya. She actually flinched at that proclamation. Liara, call her. I didn't leave you two in a room for nothing. He could feel the smugness radiating off Shikaku at those words. She didn't say anything for a minute or so. But with his eyes boring into her like that, she found that she couldn't just stay silent. All right, I'll call her, she finally conceded. Good, he said with a smile. But before I do that, we should focus, she said, becoming serious again. Let's see what our options are. She went back to the computer screens and laid her hands against the console. She taped a few keys hesitantly before stopping. No safeguards or user restrictions. It's like he never anticipated anyone but himself being here. He came up behind her, keeping a slight distance. He shrugged his shoulder. So the guy had an ego that was just as bigger as he was or bigger. That just means we don't have to hack in. You're right. And it's all ours. She looked back at him. There was a look in her eyes, a look of realization of what she had just found. He knew that look. He had seen it before. Hell, he had worn it himself. You're not going to pass this up if you had the chance, are you? How could I? I have to stay here. We can't pass this up, Naruto. She paused for a moment, considering her words. All I wanted was to rescue Furin. But is it wrong that a part of me wants this? No one's perfect, he told her. I'd be worried if you didn't want this. She turned around, facing him and the others. With the Shadow Broker's network, I can help you. Maybe I can turn this operation into something better. The elusive man would want to know about that, Jacob remarked, walking up to them alongside Miranda. Naruto looked back at them. Does the elusive man know that we're here personally? No, he doesn't, Miranda answered. We weren't given the time to inform him that we were going after the Shadow Broker. Once they got the location, they were all rushing off to come here. It stays like that. He doesn't know that the broker's a new person until I say otherwise, he declared. And given his relationship with the elusive man and the Akatsuki on whole, he wasn't much inclined to allow it. Jacob and Miranda looked at each other. If either of them had been in this situation with command on their shoulders, they would have killed any Akatsuki operatives that had come with them in order to enforce that proclamation. Even though Naruto didn't do that, they knew it wasn't because he was weak. It was more a matter of trust. He trusted them to be something else than Akatsuki operatives. He trusted them to be on his team. As you say, Commander, Miranda said, looking at him. Good. He looked back at Liara. Take a look at what he's got. All right, she agreed. She turned her attention back to the console and went to work. They didn't say or do anything as she browsed through the information the Shadow Broker had. The minutes passed on as she skimmed through the information. Oh my, she finally said. Her fingers stopped moving. What is it? Naruto asked her. There's a lot here. He had top-level access to the Turian and Asari governments, and more than one Solarian Delatras traded intel. There is also information here from the Systems Alliance that looks as if he was steadily making his way to the top. That's a lot, Jacob admitted. He could see the potential of such information, and quite frankly, it unnerved him a little bit. Miranda saw the potential too. But she saw the goldmine of it rather than the landmine. It all depends on who wields the information, she thought to herself, looking at Liara. Do you think you can handle it all without becoming a reclusive? She looked back at her with an amused look that also had an acknowledgement to it. I can understand the temptation. I've got all the secrets of the galaxy at my fingertips. Give me 10 minutes, and I could start a war. She looked back at the console and traced her fingers against it. She stopped in mid-trace and pulled her hand away. She looked at Naruto. But I've got a purpose now, helping you against the tribe and even the Reapers. That will keep me honest. She stopped and amended her words. You know, relatively speaking. We could probably crash this thing if it gets to be too much, Jacob suggested. Everyone else in the room looked at him like he had just lost his mind. It made him feel a bit defensive. I'm just saying, better for no one else to have it if we can't. You wouldn't have to be here. That's just it, Jacob, she told him. In a way, I feel like I belong here. Working on my own, I was always hunting for leads. With the Shadow Broker's resources, it's about organizing, cataloging. It does sound good, Naruto admitted. He was trained by Jiraiya and so he knew the benefits of a well-operated information network. It does, she agreed, looking at him. He could practically see the excitement shining in her eyes. I've got everything, Naruto. This is a dream job, although the location could be better. He chuckled a little at that, smiling at her. You have to take what you can get, right? She returned the smile and agreed, right. She turned back around and continued to look through the information. It was another 5 minutes before she spoke again. It looks like the Shadow Broker knew about the Reapers. Perhaps that's why he offered to help prove Saren's guilt to the Council. He didn't want Saren to succeed? Said Miranda, a little surprised. She wouldn't have thought that he had cared about it. Jacob saw what she didn't. If he did, what was the point of there being a Shadow Broker if we're all dead? Ah, I see. You're right, Liara told him with a nod before looking at Naruto. He knew you weren't lying about your visions of the Prothean beacon. She turned back to the computer and searched for another minute. There's even some data on the Protheans. I think he knew what was coming and was looking for a way to survive. Yeah, that sounds like him, Jacob decided. She didn't say anything. Her hands had frozen and she was staring at the screen. Goddess, she whispered. Naruto was instantly concerned. What is it? I can't, you need to see this. With a few quick keystrokes, she opened up a video. It showed them a shot of a pristine-looking garden, one with large hedges in the distance that formed the barrier between it and the outside world. In the center of the garden was a crossroads that allowed people to walk through any part of the garden without stepping on the flowers themselves. There were tall trees situated around the garden to provide shade for anyone who wished it. It was a peaceful place that almost looked artistic. That peace was disrupted when a large plume of smoke erupted with a loud poof. Naruto watched himself stumble out of the plume panting like he had just from Konoha to Suna to Kumo and back without stopping. Ah, close one, his video self said, resting his hands on his knees and almost content to let his head hang. Did I make it? He lifted his head and he looked around. Thank Ka. He suddenly went stiff as something struck his neck. His eyes rolled back and he collapsed to the ground. Someone else walked into the camera's view. It was a man in black tactical armor, holding a rifle in his hands and a sword strapped to his back. There was a sort of mask on his face that covered his eyes. He reached Naruto's body and nudged it roughly with his foot. Once he was satisfied, he reached out and activated his Omni tool, bringing a screen that showed nothing. Target walked right into it. As expected, he said, he's down and out. Very good, the elusive man's voice replied. Have him delivered to the Shadow Broker as expected. We will start planting rumors about the upcoming acquisition to the tribe. I'm sure that they will jump at the chance to acquire him. Understood, the man said. He deactivated the Omni tool and holstered the rifle. He picked up Naruto and threw him over his shoulder like a bag of meat. Then he just walked out of the screen. The real-life Naruto was just shocked by what he had just witnessed. He couldn't believe it. All he could think of was his last meeting with the elusive man, and what he had about the weeks the blonde had been missing. After what he had just seen, he was absolutely furious. That son of a bitch lied to me. He roared inside his own head. But what were more surprising were the reactions from Miranda and Jacob. They were both shocked and stared at the now frozen video incomprehensively. This can't be right, Miranda tried to protest. It has to be faked. It isn't, Liara told her. I checked it while we were watching it. It's authentic. It can't be, Jacob said. Why would there be a camera in a garden? The garden is on a planet that the Shadow Broker owns indirectly through shell companies and the like. It would appear that he has cameras everywhere. No, Miranda said, shaking her head in denial. That can't be right. We spent those 2 years tracking him down. There is no way that the elusive man would give him to the tribe. He didn't, Naruto said with a tight growl. He gave me to the Shadow Broker, who then gave me to the tribe. That way, the Akatsuki could ride in and save me after an opportune time. But why? She asked. Why would he have that done? I don't know. I just know that I'm pissed about it. Jacob spoke out hesitantly. What if it was so the elusive man could make sure that Naruto was crippled before getting him? They both looked at him with intense eyes. He didn't back down and explained his reasoning. He must have heard that the tribe was creating those inhibitors. If he gave the commander to them long enough for them to put the inhibitors in and feel safe while experimenting on him to find out about chakra, Naruto would have no choice but be forced to rely on his help. That's insane, Miranda protested. But even as she protested, she could see what it was he was coming from. Liara thought it over herself. It might not be, she said. How did you find the base that had Naruto? The elusive man told us. She trailed off as her words settled into her head. Naruto didn't pay much attention to what they were saying. He was more focused on what he had seen and the name he had heard. He had heard it before. Now, that name came back to him. Who is K. Lang? He asked them both. Miranda turned to him first, and then Jacob. Where did you hear that name? She asked him. Quan Misley told me it. Who is he? They didn't even look at each other before Jacob told him. He's one of the Akatsuki's best black operatives. If there's something or someone that needs to disappear, the elusive man will turn to him first. He was there on the Citadel with Miranda while you hunted for evidence against Saren. He turned to look at her. Is this true? She nodded. Yes. We were in Korra's den when you fooled Harkin and got him into the bathroom too. If he wasn't so angry about the truth revealed to him, he would have chuckled at the memory. But he was angry and focused. He had a name, he had an identity, and he had a face. If and when we find K. Lang, no one else touches him. I'm going to gut that bastard and leave his carcass hanging from a pole. Miranda was a little surprised by his sudden bloodthirstiness. Why? She asked him. Why are you going to do that? He killed Kaden like it was nothing, he replied. He's going to regret that. There was nothing in his voice that didn't suggest that he wasn't serious. Location, the Normandy. What had happened in that room? Naruto had made them all swear that it would stay between them, or they would end regretting it. Miranda had no problem giving that promise, mostly because she was still shocked by what she had witnessed. She was able to keep herself composed as they left Liara on that ship and went back to Ilium. She even kept it together as they got back to the Normandy and left the planet behind. Once she was in her office, she tried to busy herself and work. When the Ilium team discovered that they had been left on planet, they and the crew took it as break time at port. Even those who were still working took the time to go ashore and find even more upgrades for the ship, such as extended fuel cells, scanning and probe systems, as well as upgrading the medical bay. Which meant there was paperwork to look over. But even as she tried to focus, she just couldn't. The words were there on the screen, but she couldn't give them her full attention. She was still trying to understand what the elusive man had done to Naruto. She had long accepted that the Akatsuki would always be considered a threat to the galaxy by the rest of the people, even the ones they protected. But to do what he did, it went against what she thought they were trying to do. Could she be loyal to him now that she knew that he had willingly subjected the commander to the tribe? They were still trying to find the research that had been done by them on Churka. The words on her screen were starting to blur on her. She closed her eyes and tried to focus when she opened them, but it wasn't working. She heard the door open and flicked her eyes up to see who it was. Ruko? She said, surprised to see the blonde in her office. Hey, you hiding in here again? Asked Ruko bluntly, leaning against the doorway. Naruto said you came in here right away. I do have work to do, Ruko. That's not something I can just brush off. She turned her attention back to the computer and tried to focus on it again. Bullshit, the blonde said immediately. Look at yourself. You're bone-dead tired and you look like someone told you about a bad load of shit. While that wasn't too far off from the truth, it didn't change what she had to do. Do you have something you need or are you here to irritate me? She asked. Either way, leave me alone. I need to finish these up. Silence followed. Then she heard the blonde walk around the desk. She felt her hand, surprisingly warm, against her shoulder. Cheerleader, turn off the computer. You know that's not what you want right now. Her words were blunt but not cruel. Surprisingly, Miranda started to do as she was told, turning off the computer automatically. Come on, I want to show you something. She followed Ruko out of the room, being led by the hand. As they walked towards the elevator, Miranda could feel the eyes on them. Her mind started instantly to consider explanations as to what they were seeing, but they were gone before a good one could be given. Once they were in the elevator, they went down to the engineering deck. Ruko led her down further to her lair, in the engines. As they went down the steps, Miranda realized this was the first time she came here. Every time they've slept together, it had been in her office. The first thing she noticed was the mattress. She knew there had been a cot Ruko, and her brother had hauled down here before. Now that was gone and the mattress replaced it. It was bigger than the cot, resting on the floor without a bed frame. A black and blue comforter was spread out over it, and a few pillows rested on one end. Ruko let go of her hand. So, you a Brian Panties kind of a girl? She asked as she reached for the hem of her shirt. Or do you sleep in the buff? I'm a buff girl myself. It makes things easier. Miranda just watched, stunned, as her lover brazenly stripped in front of her. She couldn't believe it. Ruko had dragged her all the way down just to have sex? She couldn't deal with that now. Ruko, I'm not in the mood for sex right now, she told her sternly. There's too much on my mind. She looked back at her, her hands at her pants. She wasn't wearing a bra beneath her shirt, as usual. What? I didn't bring you down here to fuck me, cheerleader, she said, sounding a little offended. I brought you down here so you can get some sleep. Miranda almost couldn't believe those words when she heard them. Again, the clone of Naruto surprised her. Oh, she replied, the words coming out almost on their own. I see. Now she felt a little foolish for having snapped at her like that. Ruko grunted and acknowledged and dropped her pants, taking her panties down with them. There she stood, completely naked. Well? She asked Miranda. Are you going to strip or what? She broke eye contact, almost looking embarrassed. I didn't buy the stuff just for me. She looked back at the mattress again. It was bigger than the cot, that she already knew. But she also saw it was big enough for the two of them. It struck her like a sledgehammer. Ruko hadn't gotten the mattress just for herself. She had gotten it for them. As she looked at the mattress, she was struck by the love the blonde had for her. She reached up for the suit's zipper. Actually, I prefer shirts, she told Ruko, pulling it down. But if that's not available, I'll go nude. Looks like you'll have to sleep naked then, she replied, giving her a once-over as she stepped out of the suit. I think I like it like that. In spite of those words, when they crawled into the bed, there was no sex. Miranda felt drowsy almost as soon as her head hit the pillow, Ruko's back to her. She reached out and pulled her closer, resting her chin on her shoulder. The blonde didn't complain at the move. She just moved closer so it would be more comfortable and pulled the comforter up to their necks. What had happened that day took a back seat to Miranda as she held Ruko in her arms. She liked the feeling. Strange as it might have been months earlier, having the blonde in her arms made all the confusing things seem alright. She didn't lose that feeling, lose her. They fell asleep there, warm and safe. Codex entry, humanity and the systems alliance. The Thing, a tradition going back to olden days. The Thing was a gathering of free Midgardians, particularly for Jarls and their guests. A location for a thing is designated as a thingstead, and is often a Midgardian religious site. Due to this, ritual sacrifices and celebrations take place during a thing, although the former has petered out as the years have gone on. Nowadays, all that is required is a cut from the hand. It is also during a thing that clan heads and Jarls would come to discuss official business, something that continues even with the beginning of Vidar Black Forest's tenure as High Jarl. The thingstead is also presided over by whoever owns the territory in which the thing is being held. As such, it is the Jarl or clan head's responsibility to see to the security over the proceedings, i.e. because the religious site of Uppsala was in Vidar Black Forest's lands, it was his responsibility to ensure that law was enforced whenever it was his time to hold a thing. Even in modern times, things are still held on religious sites in Midgardian-dominant worlds in the alliance with alterations to the festivities. Among these changes, human sacrifice is no longer practiced by law, but a sacrifice of blood to the Aesir usually suffices, being used as a promise by soldiers on active duty that their souls belong to the gods. Hallucinogenic mushrooms are also banned, as ingesting them is known to cause Midgardians to go berserk. When a clan head or a jarl is invited to a thing, it is optional but usually considered polite to attend. Apart from doing so for good manners, attendance of a thing offers a chance for politics to come into play, giving an opportunity to forge better bonds between communities. Even the disgraced tend to go out of their way to honor this tradition, holding their own things in their own territory. Among the things that haven't changed is the fact that party crashers are welcome to the festivities, should they happen across a thing. Some Asari and many Krogans set their vacations to coincide with days in which a thing would take place.